Good morning, and welcome to the Education and Culture Committee, first one of 2026. We have a couple of really exciting introductions to make today. We've got some new faces on the committee, but not new to the MCPS and to this issue or to any of us. We're really happy to have Councilmember Shebra Evans at her first committee meeting as the member of the best committee on the council, the Education and Culture Committee. And we just welcome you and congratulations, and we're happy to have you. And we know we're going to benefit from your great knowledge and expertise and care for our system. So I'm going to turn to you in a moment, see if you want to say anything. But also we just want to acknowledge we have at least one board member, Rita Montoya, here. Thank you for joining, and I'm sure some others. When I recognize folks in the room, I've got 2 texts from other board members. I'm watching online, so to anyone who's watching online, thank you very much. So before we get started, we have really 2 important items, but I also want to recognize Dr. Naya Hamlet, who this is her first meeting with us as well. So you're going to hear from you in a moment, the Chief Equity and Development Officer, and I think it's longer than that, but you can tell us the appropriate title when you come up, but we're happy to have you. But first, let me turn to our new colleague, Councilmember Evans, see if she wants to make any comments.
Good morning, good morning. I am so excited to be here, to see familiar faces in the audience, and to work alongside Councilmember Jawando and Councilmember Mink. As you said, I am very familiar. And so I'll remind everybody, I'm going to try to not sound like a board member and sound like a council member, but excited and just really want to thank staff and my colleagues, just everyone here at the council for being so welcoming and just getting me ready for the session. So looking forward to the dialogue and discussion. And once again, excited for the year to come.
Well, thank you very much, and don't worry, we'll remind you that this is the council and not the board. I think we'll help with that. So let me turn to our staff to tee up the 2 items in 1 second. I just want to acknowledge that this topic, and I think I'm a good person, and when we had this topic, we put it out there. This was just normal business for us to come back and look at. International enrollment, which we do, but also the anti-racist audit. But we have to realize we're in the context of a very difficult time for our country. As I'm sure we'll hear, one of the reasons international enrollment is down is because of the time we're going through and the really hateful and harmful and racist attacks from the Trump administration. And while we would always be here talking about the anti-racist audit as well in our second item, it takes on even more importance and more meaning in this context. And when we put out the release that we were going to do these, we got a lot of nasty grams from a lot of people that we were just going to talk about these items. And so it's just a reminder of the context, but also just, I think, a good thing that we're Montgomery County and we don't shy away from taking care of all of our students, no matter where we find them. And making sure that they all feel comfortable and welcomed, and that includes our educators, our parents, and we don't shy away from a difficult conversation because we know that it's ultimately better for them. And we care about diversity, equity, and inclusion here. We're not running in the opposite direction. So, and we're in a system where 70% of our kids are students of color. So, it's not only the right thing to do, we have to do it. So just wanted to bring that up. And as we start the year, just remind folks that this committee, this council is going to keep talking about important issues that impact our families and our communities, no matter what. And we're here for all of you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Prouty and Ms. Cummings to get us started.
Thank you, Chair Jawando. Thank you, Councilmembers Mink and Evans. I'm Doug Prouty, Senior Legislative Analyst. The panel from here, MCPS, is here today to give the committee an overview of the work of the International Admissions and Enrollment Office. The packet includes background on which students this office works with to enroll in MCPS. Also included is a description of the process for determining the appropriate placement and support for the student based on interviews and a review of documents. Information on the range of services from the school system, other county agencies, and private caregivers follows, as well as a description of the information needed to complete the enrollment process. Finally, the report provides a review of previous committee work sessions on this topic, a step-by-step review of the operations of the office, and data on enrollment currently. Council staff thanks the leadership of this office here with us today, as well as those who helped them prepare for today's work session. And please note that in the attachments to the packet, there are guides for newcomer students and for schools, which were created by interns who were themselves newcomer students. These guides are really worth taking a look at. Ms. Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Prouty. For our second item, we have an update on the implementation of the Anti-Racist Audit Action Plan. Pages 1 through 3 of the staff report provides background on the anti-racist audit findings, which took place between December of 2020 and July 2022. The audit looked at access, opportunities, and equitable outcomes for every student's academic and social-emotional well-being by evaluating through the lens of 6 distinct domains. A summary of these findings with each associated domain is on Table 1 of the packet. In response to the audit findings, the Anti-Racist System Action Plan was presented to the Board of Education in May of 2023, which identified steps that MCPS would take to address system-level, domain, and school-level actions. The progression of deliverables and action steps were initially tracked through the public-facing Anti-Racist System Action Plan document. This tool was not regularly updated, as was discussed in the committee meeting of January last year. Since our meeting last year, MCPS has undergone significant organizational structure changes and has implemented a new strategic plan. With these changes, the way in which the action plan is being implemented is currently under transition. Dr. Naya Hamlet is attending and will speak to how the anti-racist commitments are now being embedded into the accountability structures, such as the strategic plan goals and school improvement plans, rather than as a standalone or siloed initiative. She will also speak to what action plan work was underway thus far and how it connects to the work that will be embedded into the larger accountability structures. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for teeing that up. So if the folks for our first item, which was the international enrollment, want to come up and we'll introduce yourselves. And you all have a slides as well, right? Yep. Good morning. Go ahead. Button to your left there. No, you go. The one, there you go. Or to your right, I'm sorry. My left, your right. There you go.
Thank you so much. Good morning, members of the County Council of Education and Culture Committee. We're very happy to be here today to share some great news with you about our work over the last few years. But I do want to take a moment to give a special thanks to Councilmember Mink and Jawando for all of your support over the last couple of years, especially with our ETC positions and just international enrollment in general. And it's so wonderful to see Councilmember Evans here supporting us as you supported us when you were in MCPS. Thank you. It's great to see you here. I am Margarita Borges. I'm Director of International Admissions and Enrollment, or IAE. I am joined today by Oscar Alvarenga, our newcomer coordinator. We are pleased to share how MCPS is supporting our newest residents through a centralized trauma-informed approach to enrollment and long-term academic success. As many of you may recall, my office has spent the past few years diligently updating, upgrading, and streamlining our operations to better serve families. I'm happy to report that our operations have undergone huge improvements that have had a tremendous impact on our enrolling families and students. Although many of our improvements have been technical in nature, they have made all the difference in how we identify, place, and enroll students. Giving our families a strong and positive start in our district sets the tone for their academic success and their connection to their schools and communities. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I thought the slides were up. Thank you. As you can see from this slide, our district is incredibly diverse with families arriving from all over the world. We serve a broad spectrum of families ranging from those seeking asylum and refugees to international executives and diplomatic families. Regardless of their background, whether they are here for work at the NIH or fleeing a crisis, our goal is to ensure every student feels they belong to our community from day one. This broad spectrum of families has necessitated a culturally proficient approach by well-trained staff to ensure that all families feel welcomed and supported as they enter our school system. We also require a deep understanding of laws, regulations, and guidelines to appropriately guide families through the enrollment process and as they settle in their new community. Next slide, please.
Could you go back to that one for a second? When I saw
Sure.
this the other day, I just wanted to highlight this. So the green dot, these are raw numbers, like number of students.
Yes.
So the green dot is Ethiopia, obviously, right?
Yes, we have a
then-
lot of families from Africa, especially Ethiopia. Yes.
And I'd be really curious. I think I know it on the like kind of just anecdotally, but to know like, and I think I've probably seen it at one point, where the big dots, like where the top 10 or so locations where kids are coming from. Like you can see some here, obviously, that you can just recognize, but I'd be curious
Yes.
to see that.
Yeah, we can definitely share the disaggregated data so you can see the countries and the languages. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. In this slide, we like to share the different buckets of work that we engage in our office. We go beyond just enrollment. The IAE office operates as a comprehensive welcome center. We don't just process enrollment, we provide mental health intakes, credit evaluations, and essential resources like food and clothing to support families. By collaborating with partners like CASA and the Gilchrist Center, we ensure a holistic approach for every family. And as you can see on the slide, our buckets of work are divided into 4 rough sections. The Welcome Center is where we first meet the families, support them with Parent View, which is online enrollment and could be challenging for many of our families. We do food and clothing distribution. That's where we connect with our community partners. Then we have the enrollment bucket. That's where we really do the intakes with all of our student categories, not just newcomers, but we also have non-resident students. We have foreign exchange students, McKinney-Vento students, and our English testing also falls within this bucket. Third is our collaboration with schools. We're in schools on a regular basis, supporting them with enrollment issues, testing, anything they may need around supporting these categories of students, and our connection to the community and bringing them in to collaborate with us to support these families. And lastly, but not least, our EML therapeutic counselors, which is our mental health arm of the work that we do. They're at Rocking Horse supporting us during enrollment and doing mental health intakes. And then they're meeting these students at their schools, supporting them with orientations and helping them acclimate to their new schools. So it's a broad scope of work. Next slide. I'm happy to report that efficiency is key to student stability. I'm proud to share that 75% of our students are enrolled within just 2 days of arriving at our office. If you've been with us for a few years, you know that right after the pandemic, lack of resources, staffing, enrollment was taking much longer, which definitely was a barrier for our families, but we're doing it within 2 days, and 95% of the families enroll within a week. We do have a small percentage of families that need more time, but that's due to challenges around providing the right documentation or due to complex residency issues that we have to help resolve. This rapid turnaround minimizes the time children are out of school and helps families stabilize quickly. Over the past 4 years, our enrollment has changed in many ways. We launched the Welcome Center where families can just walk in without an appointment to seek assistance with enrollment or with any other question they may have. All families must begin with enrollment via Parent View, and our Welcome Center staff assist them with creating accounts, uploading enrollment documentation, and connecting them to services in the community. We launched a new call center that allows for calls to be added to a queue or for families to choose a callback option. Families also receive critical enrollment information as they are on hold. We can support families in multiple languages, either through bilingual staff or by connecting to the language line. This has greatly reduced missed calls or families not being able to get through during busy times. The intake process has been entirely integrated into Synergy, and our intake specialists are able to accept cases electronically with attached documents that eliminates the need for appointments and allows them to review all documentation in real time and electronically. We also process non-resident and McKinney-Vento and other enrollment cases this way. Our testing staff administer the English proficiency screener to all newcomers who are flagged via the home language survey. In fact, 86% of our newcomers qualify for ELD services, which is why our office is now under the Division of Multilingual Education and function as the operational arm of the division, identifying, screening, and placing students for enrollment in schools. Once our EML students are screened and identified, they meet with an EML therapeutic counselor for a mental health screening that helps students feel welcomed and also allows us to identify any urgent needs that need to be addressed immediately. Lastly, we provide families with an orientation and have them complete a satisfaction survey so we can monitor our impact and make improvements as needed. They are assisted with transportation, school forms, and ultimately connecting to their schools. Next slide. This is an important graph or chart around student enrollment. We totaled the numbers after December just so you can clearly see the progress over 3 years. And we totaled them again at the bottom, understanding that the last column is the year we're currently in, and so we're still enrolling for this year. The next 3 slides will provide a snapshot of our current enrollment trends over the past 3 years. This chart illustrates our international student enrollment by month. And like I said, we show the total after December 31st to reflect all 3 years. Although we have experienced an overall decline, our families' needs have increased and become more complex. Next slide. The International Admissions and Enrollment Office manages a diverse and complex student portfolio. Beyond international admissions, our scope encompasses McKinney-Vento, non-resident, tuition-paying, and exchange students. While previous reporting focused primarily on newcomers, it is critical to recognize the full breadth of our office's responsibilities. This comprehensive view highlights the specialized expertise required to navigate varied enrollment mandates and underscores the necessity of a robust, well-trained team to meet these multifaceted student needs. This graph illustrates our enrollment work in each of our student subgroups. Please note that the yellow or gold bar, Doug, I'm still in Prius, thank you. Please note that the yellow or gold bar reflects our numbers as of this month, January 2026. Although there has been a clear decline in newcomer enrollment due to the current political climate and other factors, all other student groups reflect an increase. In fact, we have experienced a 68% increase in our McKinney-Vento student identification over the previous 3 years. A dedicated staff member that specializes in McKinney-Vento enrollment and support is needed. We have also experienced an increase in non-resident enrollment tied to crisis cases that require additional support and time to manage and process appropriately. Next slide. We continue to see significant numbers of international students engaging with IAE services, reflecting Montgomery County's status as a premier destination for global families. The services most used include support in the Welcome Center, English proficiency testing, and orientations, but we also offer youth summits twice a year in which newcomer students are invited from all high schools to participate in a full day of activities and presentations at Montgomery College. These summits, in collaboration with the college, give our students the exposure and opportunity to see themselves pursuing a post-secondary education. Lastly, we process and notarize school records that families need when they return to their home countries. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to my newcomer coordinator, Oscar Alvarenga, and he's going to talk about our work with our community partners.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity, council members. IE's work extends beyond enrollment and is grounded on coordinated supports that begin at the Welcome Center. This work made possible by a dedicated on-site team, including 2 MCPS staff members and our partners at CASA, who provide navigators that support families as they move through the enrollment and connection to services. Our collaboration with community partners allows families to be connected early to trusted, culturally responsive support, which helps prevent challenges from escalating into school-based emergencies. This proactive approach reduces instructional disruption, supports staff capacity, and minimizes reactive crisis management. These supports are not passive referrals. The Welcome Center actively coordinates warm handoffs. You'll hear that word a couple times, ensuring families understand available services, trust providers, and are able to successfully follow through. As we move into the next slide, it's important to note that this is a coordinated model, and the outcomes it produces is directly tied to staffing and partnership capacity. Changing in funding can significantly affect our ability to maintain these services at our level our families and schools rely on. When fully resourced, this model directly advances MCPS future-ready vision by creating positive, safe, and effective learning environments where students are supported and ready to learn. And the slide before that. There we go. I lost a bet, so they put my picture up there. Okay? We have to have fun. Our approach at the Welcome Center is intentional and active. Once families enter through the Welcome Center, our work becomes coordinated and collaborative, recognizing that no single office or school can meet the full range of needs many newcomer families bring with them. While enrollment is our core function, our trained staff also assesses factors that directly affect a student's ability to engage in school, including housing instability, safety concerns, language access, and social-emotional well-being. ParentView is the MCPS online system used to submit enrollment applications and require documentation. And our staff support families by account creation through accurate submission, helping prevent delays in enrollment, as you can see with the 95% within a week. While families are on site, they can also access immediate supports, including our clothing corner, non-perishable food, and information about county and community resources. This allows us to address basic needs at the same time families are navigating enrollment. In addition, the Welcome Center provides real-time referrals based on family needs. These referrals include health, recreation programs, legal resources, and other educational opportunities, including pathways to Montgomery College. As reflected on the slide, the Know Your Rights is another critical area of support. We work closely with community partners and MCPS staff to ensure families and staff have access to accurate and trusted information. Through these collaborations, MCPS has developed both staff-facing and community-facing immigration support pages, recognizing how important this information is for the entire school community. In my role as a newcomer coordinator, I have worked with partners to coordinate legal clinics for families and have provided professional development and presentation to community partners, school staff, and parents to help build shared understanding and capacity. Equally important, our EML therapeutic counselors, known as our ETCs, respond when students are impacted by immigration-related challenges, providing trauma-responsive support that helps stabilize students and maintain safe and supportive learning environments. Together, this coordinated model ensures families are supported holistically and students are able to enter and remain in school ready to learn and succeed. All right, our ETCs. A cornerstone of our student support framework is our distinguished team of 20 EMLs, therapeutic counselors, our ETCs. Their primary mission is to cultivate psychological safety and a prerequisite for academic engagement. Despite historical staffing fluctuations driven by budget cycles, our current team remains steadfast to providing specialized trauma-responsive interventions directly within school communities. Beyond direct student services, our ETCs serve as a critical capacity builders, equipping schools-based staff with specialized tools and necessary to support the unique needs of newcomer populations with consistency and excellence. Want to highlight that our ETC teams recently has been nationally recognized for the National Centers of School Mental Health Youth and Family Partnership awarded in 2025 and the Mental Health America Betty Humphrey Equity Champion Award in 2024. A little bit more about our ETCs. The data illustrates the comprehensive clinical and administrative support EML therapeutic counselors provide to our multilingual learners. As indicated on the bar graph, ETCs are vital to school operations, facilitating crisis response, restorative counseling lessons, and direct mental health interventions. They serve as a bridge between a central office and school-based staff, ensuring seamless collaboration. Since 2023, ETCs have conducted over 4,200 newcomer orientations. These sessions are critical for school navigation, ensuring students are empowered to engage with the new environment from day one. By conducting mental health screening at the point of enrollment, ETCs proactively identify social challenges. This warm handoff to school counselors ensures that support systems, including community partner referrals, are active before the students even enter the classroom. And I will say, schools love this because they get a report before the student even gets there, and they're able to connect with them already with substance. Schools love that.
Just before you leave this slide, just so we know what we're looking at, this is the total number of interactions. It could be duplicated or not. I'm assuming this is just the interactions with students by
Correct.
year, correct?
Yes.
And how many ETCs are there right now? You said 20?
20, yes, and I'll touch on the numbers in the next
Getting
slide.
to that. Okay, good. And then just for folks watching at home, the millions watching at home, I like to say, might be a little less than millions because we know that the web council website access to this streaming is down, but the YouTube is up. In the packet they're working on it, so just information will be put up. I just want to let people know that, but we're aware and we're working on it. So please continue.
Thank you. Next slide. Here we're going to take you through a little timeline here. In 2018, you see we had 10 ETCs. And over the years, we were able to get to 37 ETCs in 2023, and that was partly due to the support from the county council in helping us launch with some funding. But since then, as you can see, we're down to 20. While the ETCs team has experienced staffing reduction since 2023, the complexity of student needs continue to intensify. Our ETCs provide specialized trauma-responsive expertise that is essential for navigating the unique challenges currently facing our EML population. Furthermore, the volatility of the current immigration climate has significantly increased the demand of crisis intervention. To maintain a safe and effective learning environment, it is vital to align our staffing levels with these expanding requirements, as the current team capacity is increasingly strained by the volume of high-intensity responses. Furthermore, the current classification of ETCs as a SEIU support staff fails to reflect their professional qualifications as licensed mental health clinicians with advanced degrees. This discrepancy leads to logistical challenges during involuntary transfers, as the district lacks equivalent SEIU roles that honors their specialized expertise and licensure. Although we have initiated dialogue to move these positions to MCA to better align with professional standards, our progress is consistently hampered by the immediate need to defend against continued position cuts. Aligning this role with an appropriate bargaining unit is essential for both staff retention and the integrity of our student support services. I will pass it back to Ms. Margarita.
Thank you, Oscar. In the next section of our presentation, we're going to focus on academic excellence. IAE is often thought of as just operational with enrollment and testing, but we do have a huge impact on the academic success of our students. In alignment with our strategic plan, IAE's strategic transformation has enhanced academic equity through an optimized credit evaluation process. Of all the process improvements over the last 3 years, the most significant has been the total overhaul of our secondary credit evaluation system. Previously, a lack of specialized content expertise meant IAE issued generalized credit evaluations. This shifted the burden of determination to individual high schools. resulting in inconsistent placements, administrative bottlenecks, and most critically, students being forced to retake courses they had already mastered. Next slide. Currently, 40% of our newcomers are high school aged, which requires specialized focus on credit transfers to ensure they remain on a path of graduation. Schools such as Gaithersburg and Montgomery Blair have enrolled over 500 newcomers in the past few years. 5 other high schools have enrolled over 400. As you can imagine, this level of enrollment necessitates a tremendous amount of support for these students and school staff. Next slide. Following a 3-year cross-functional collaboration with curriculum offices for math, science, social studies, and English, we developed a comprehensive global coursework database. This proprietary tool analyzes the curricula of our top enrolling countries to ensure every international credit is transferred accurately. As you can imagine, this has had huge impact on our secondary newcomers. The first evidence of this would be accurate placement. Students are now placed in their correct grade levels alongside their age-appropriate cohorts. Another impact we've witnessed is graduation pathways. Improved data allows for immediate, effective graduation planning. And not to mention student equity. By honoring their previous academic rigor, we affirm our students' identities and ensure they have immediate access to new advanced learning. For newcomer students who have already graduated or risk exceeding age eligibility before completing a traditional high school diploma, IAE facilitates critical transitions through strategic community partnerships. By collaborating with CREA, Montgomery College, and WorkSource, we provide robust alternative pathways and specialized support to ensure these students can successfully pursue post-secondary education and workforce development. The impact of this work is clear. Most of our high schools saw significant improvement in multilingual learner graduation rates after implementing technical fixes and targeted support. Our expertise is directly translating into better outcomes for our students. Next slide. And last but not least, IAE has also a great impact on high quality and diverse workforce. Our ultimate commitment lies in fostering system-wide capacity, from spearheading youth leadership summits to equipping school leadership with trauma-responsive pedagogical frameworks. We are dedicated to ensuring every MCPS office and school is prepared to meet the unique needs of our diverse student body. By building this institutional expertise, we provide a continuum of support for our international, multilingual learner and McKinney-Vento students, ensuring their success is a district-wide priority. Lastly, this is just a sampling of some of the work that we do for professional growth and capacity building. We recognize that the sustainability of our process improvements depends entirely on continuous high-quality professional growth and capacity building. To this end, we provide a tiered professional learning framework. For example, we have system-wide initiatives, such as through our partnership with the National Compadres Network. We provide circle keeper training for central and school-based staff. These sessions integrate restorative justice practices anchored in indigenous principles, enabling newcomer students to affirm their identities and navigate the acculturation process with resilience. Second, we target schools. We facilitate student-centered learning through initiatives like the Youth Leadership Summits, hosted at Montgomery College. These immersive experiences are designed to catalyze interest in post-secondary education and provide students with tangible college readiness resources. Third, community-based integration. In collaboration with regional stakeholders, IAE hosts comprehensive resource fairs to bridge the gap between families and essential services. These events provide vital access to everything from basic necessities to specialized legal advocacy. Ultimately, IAE is committed to the philosophy that consistent professional development is the foundational requirement for lasting institutional impact and student success. This concludes our presentation for today. Thank you so much for having us, and I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you're doing, and the update. It's really helpful in reminding us that you do a lot more than international students. And there was a recent article about our students who are experiencing homelessness. I can't remember what outlet it was in, but just we have thousands of students that are every day getting up and experiencing homelessness, and we know that unfortunately evictions and those numbers continue to rise. We're coming up on our point in time count here again this year, and shortly many of us will be out there, and while we don't want to see it, we're worried that those numbers are continuing to rise. So that's really important. I'll ask a couple of questions and then turn to my colleagues who I know have questions, and then we'll go into the next item. So let me just start with the ETCs. I was kind of foreshadowing the question a little bit. I was very involved, as we're in the council supported, with the boost in numbers that we saw at a very critical time. Obviously, that number has continued to dwindle. You mentioned many of the cases are more complex now, and even though the overall number of international students has seen a downward trend because of the climate, but could you talk about just what the challenges are and what the real world impact for you for those 20, and as far as caseloads, complexity, and don't sugarcoat it, what's really needed based on what you're seeing, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So technically, we have 24 positions at the moment, but a few of the ETCs have left to join other groups, either within MCPS or in the community. So we really have 20 counselors currently working with schools. The impact is severe. Our ETCs are assigned to 2 to 3 schools each, and then they provide county-wide referral support. So we are supporting all 211 schools. And by reducing our ETC team, as you can imagine, it really stretches the team thin. I have to change the assignment to schools, sometimes dropping schools who could really use the support, or we have to triage the countywide referrals that we receive and try to build capacity with our counselors at schools to help support these students. But as you can imagine, our newcomer students really need our ETC expertise because they're culturally proficient, they're bilingual. And it's not just about being bilingual. We've hired mental health professionals from those countries who can really connect with these students as they're arriving in our country, in our county, and acclimating to our new school system and our community. So this is a very specialized, unique group of staff support that has existed for more than 30 years, and no one else in the county does their work.
And obviously this, we'll have the operating budget before us. The board will take its action. It'll come to us. This is something that always comes up in the budget forums that we do and in the community conversations, particularly for folks who are impacted. So when you say you might have to drop a school that did have access to in one of these counselors, how this year, for example, what schools have dropped off? Or
Yes, we're currently looking at that right now. Right now, we're looking at having to move about 5 schools from having an ETC assigned to them 1 day a week to moving them back to a county-wide referral process, meaning we don't abandon our schools. We will support our schools as much as we can, but now the school is forced to submit a referral in which we have to find time to then send an ETC out to support them. As you can imagine, it's a big difference to have a dedicated ETC once a week as opposed to waiting for an ETC who's able to come out when the time allows. That could take a little longer.
Yeah, and do you have an estimate on that? Like, what are the referrals? So walk me through the referral process. I'm a teacher or a counselor or a staff member, and I see a student has a need. I don't know. I know I can't meet it, but I think it might need this service. Someone fills out the form, they submit it to your office. Walk through what that
Yes,
timeline is.
absolutely. So anyone in the school system can go online to fill out the Google survey and request an ETC counselor to come and support an EML student. We have a variety of questions we asked in the survey just to make sure we are tackling the right crisis and supporting correctly. They will give us either an academic concern, often it's a reunification or a acculturation concern. We really try to focus on our SLIFE and EML 1 and 2s who really need that expertise support. And then we have my ETC coordinator, Norca Yarborough. She does a pre-screening of sorts to see what the issue is. If it's something that's around building capacity, she will reach out to the school, work with the counselors to support that school. But if it's something more challenging or deeper in nature, we will send out an ETC to support and build capacity as well.
So kind of triaging, as you mentioned.
We have to, given the small group. I mean, you're talking about 20 people supporting 33,000 EMLs. We try to focus on their lower levels and 211 schools. So as you can imagine, that's a lot of work for a small team.
I appreciate that. And if you could, as a follow-up, just as you're going through the reallocation process, just send the committee when those changes are made, what the changes are, because we get questions about that a lot, of
Okay.
where the resources are, and we want to have the most up-to-date information.
Absolutely.
Council member, if I can add.
Please.
One of the things that, like Margarita is talking about, the county, in the last year, with everything that's happening with this new administration, has caused folks reaching out to me that families are being detained, they're being deported. And sometimes they don't even know. Some of the staff are they just want to wrap around services as quickly as possible for these kids. So the stuff that the issues that people were calling us for
Right.
have changed to crisis mode when we find out that a student's parent got picked up yesterday, and that student is asking, "Where's my parent?" It creates such a crisis where we have to then shift and pivot and get our supporting services so that we can support these students. And that's happening throughout the county. It used to be you can pick. I can probably say this area is going to be affected more or this area. It's everywhere now. And that's because such a crisis. And with 20 folks being spread out, the conversations is, well, today I'm going to stop by these four schools domino because we have these crises happening. So Margarita will get you that information, but it is important to know that what's happening with this administration is affecting our students in real time, and it's affecting the level of service that our staff is able to provide.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, that was kind of where I was going to go next, and I know other colleagues will probably want to dig into this, in that, it's not only the types of requests you're getting, it's the cascading effect and the impact in the scale of it. If someone was picked up and their parents aren't home, that's a crisis level event. All of these things are important, but then that also has an impact on the things that you might not be able to address because you're triaging, right? Like the issues that you might have been dealing with 4 years ago that were more, still important, right? Students dealing with how they integrate or their school, but you're dealing with crisis level with less people. I just think we have to take that into account. I mean, it's just, we've never seen anything this bad in that regard. So thank you. I'll turn to colleagues. I just want to say really good job on the 2-week turnaround, on how quickly you're getting folks enrolled. That's really heartening to see. And I hope we can continue to make improvements there. I just have one question on that, on the residency issues. You said that can be a reason for some of the delays, the complex residency issues. Could you talk about, and I know you have PPWs doing visits, and just have you seen an impact, given this climate, like that whole process, how do you feel that is going? What can we be doing better?
Yes, thank you for elevating that. As we've said before, even though the newcomer numbers are reducing in enrollment, we are seeing a huge rise in crisis incidents, which is our non-resident students. Those are students who are living in our county without their parents. I don't know if everyone knows, but a student's residency in terms of county, not immigration status, they're tied to their parents. So given crisis, either deportations, it could be death, incarceration, hospitalization, there's all kinds of crisis categories that we consider. A lot of students are here with family members, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and they become non-resident students. So that enrollment takes a little longer because they come through my residency specialist's office where they're talking to the family to make sure that we have all the information we need. And we can enroll them as a non-resident students, exempting them from tuition. Because for regular non-resident students, they have to pay tuition to be enrolled here. And we make sure we identify a crisis so that they can enroll tuition free. But we've seen a huge rise in those incidents due to the political climate and other things as well. The McKinney-Vento enrollment has also increased significantly because of these factors. And they also require more specialized, nuanced, careful support at enrollment. It's not as quick as a father enrolling a son and they have all their documentation. You can enroll them very quickly. The others take a little more time.
Appreciate that. And please keep us posted on that as well as far as the resources required to deal with that other influx. Right. Turn first to Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. I'm going to share first that I arrived today directly from a crisis incident in my district, which certainly highlights what we're discussing today. As I was passing through what has been a hotspot area and found a student, a teenager, who was there because he had followed his dad's phone, who had been detained and was with up to potentially 10 other people in the same vehicle who I guess they saw fit to detain all of them, because that's the kind of screening that the feds are using now. And the son had legal residency and had his paperwork with him. And was there in his pajamas, with his residency papers. And then when he inquired politely as to who was going to pay for the damage done to the van, how that works, they detained him as well, and violently. So now they were aware that they were on camera after that, then refusing to respond to a council member who was asking why they were detaining him, who they were, what their reasoning was, and why they were refusing to look at his papers that he had with him. And they were also aware that we had the lack of obstruction that was occurring when they detained him also on video. So I understand that just as I arrived here, he was being released. And we will be in touch with your office because when you think about the level of trauma that comes from that, obviously, we're following up on Dad and trying to figure out who else was there and all of those things. But this is happening every day, repeatedly now. It's just nonstop. And even the kids whose parents have not been detained that day, the ripple impact that this is having on the mental health of our students, those who fear their loved ones being taken, and those who are learning about this fear in their fellow classmates and who are asking their parents why their friend's parent isn't there anymore, why their friend is moving to another country all of a sudden after being here for their whole lives, to reunite with a parent who either on purpose or by accident signed papers saying that they would leave the country. And so now the whole family is uprooting. Business owners I've seen do this now. The level of trauma that our student body is facing from this crisis is hard to even wrap my mind around. I'm obviously still reeling from this morning, but there was a not so different incident yesterday also, and it's a constant barrage, and we are trying to get our kids to be successful academically through all of this. It's an absolutely unfathomable timeline that we are living through right now. And so I'm glad that you are here to highlight that although this federal administration has caused our international enrollments to decline, the work in this space is absolutely skyrocketing. I cannot even get the reports fast enough. And each of these traumas to one student and one family is also traumatizing a whole community of students and others around them. And the importance of having people who are culturally proficient, who students and families feel safe talking to, and who get it, who understand on some level. I think it's really important, the point that you made, that it's not just about translation. And we cannot come and have this conversation a year from now and be hearing, don't worry, there's a language line, okay? I think in the context of this conversation, we can all recognize how absolutely ridiculous that would be. We have to have people who speak the language in more ways than one, the cultural proficiency, understanding the context of what the family is going through is so important and so valuable. So I appreciate the work very much, and I'm glad that we're able to really have a thorough conversation about the way it is changing even month to month at this point, because the rate is absolutely increasing. With the shift from 24 to 20, or really with every change, everybody you lose, can you speak to like how that changes who you have available in terms of the language that they speak and the background that they have? Because it's not like one person can replace another, that 20th person is the same as the 21st person. Could you just speak to that a little bit?
Excuse me. Yes, absolutely. The languages are very important. About half of our EML students, and the number fluctuates given the differences in demographics over the last year or so, but about half of our EML students are Spanish speakers, so a large portion of our ETCs are Spanish speakers. But we have a huge Brazilian community, and we have one Portuguese speaker handling all of the county-wide referrals for that population. As you can imagine, we don't have her assigned to 3 schools. We have her assigned only to 2 so that she can do more county-wide. We've had a huge increase in our Afghan community over the last 3 years, as you, I'm sure, have heard, refugee families from that area. So those languages have been heavily impacted, and I have one ETC who can help, who is from that area. So in terms of the cultural proficiency, these are mental health professionals from those areas. I have 2 Ethiopian ETCs who speak Amharic and Tigrinya and can help that community. And that community, to your point, really feels comfortable speaking to those 2 ETCs. But we have a very large Ethiopian population. I could use 5 of those ETCs to really communicate with the community and with that student population.
And when we look at that population, that is not one group.
No,
and so
they're very
having
diverse.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you've got to have the right people to speak to each of those communities.
Correct. And to your
really,
point, having a counselor call the language line, they're not going to understand that the family that speaks Tigrinya feels, not so sure about the ones who are speaking Amharic. And those nuances are only known by our professional health, our mental health professionals who understand that nuance. A regular counselor calling the language line is not going to understand all of that, and they could offend. They can totally turn off a family from even engaging with the school. So that's why I say this team is so critical and so specialized in what they do, and no one else in our county does this work.
Thank you. And I also was going to note that just as another example of the way that the work is shifting, I know that I'm seeing more families who need to make use of, for example, the transcript services, who are preparing, helping families move to other countries and wanting to make sure that they take those credits from MCPS and those records with them. So we've got families we have students who are staying, and that brings one bucket of complications and challenges. And then we have students who are moving, and sometimes that's part of the family is moving, and part of the family is not moving, and that brings all of those challenges as well. And so, just thinking about the capacity to, and it's not a great process, right? We have to deal with. It's not all internal, right? We're really dealing with. We've got the State Department and all of those things, and so there's only so much choice that we have, and we have to try to support families in going through that process, and you all really are managing that. Could you speak to that part of it?
Yes, no, thank you. As you just mentioned, for students that are returning to their countries, there's a very involved process for getting their transcripts from their schools. They come to our office where we basically certify that these are actual school records. I sign all of them. I have a notary in-house that notarizes my signature, but then the family has to go to the courthouse, then they have to go to Annapolis. And what we're seeing a huge increase of is families who are getting deported and need these records yesterday because they're leaving. And so we're trying to expedite those records within the same day as if possible. But as you can see, that's a very lengthy process, starting with the school being able to issue those transcripts, coming to us, and all the other steps they have to take. So that's been very burdensome, especially for families that are experiencing immigration crises.
Thank you. Yeah, important to just for I think everyone who's watching to understand that what we're seeing is that you're having to change systems entirely, because now it's not like families are planning, they're going to move next year, let's get all this stuff in order. Now it's families are gone and they need their records, or dad is gone and the kid is going to go and they need their, this is what we're doing. It's just a completely different scenario, which requires definitely not less personnel, but different structures. And you all are working through that. So Thank you for that. I will yield.
Thank you very much. Really important points. Councilmember Evans.
Yes. So it's so great to see you all, and I am so glad that we have the International Admissions Office here in Montgomery County. I don't know how many other places have the ability to provide this type of support to their students, but I'm glad that I was on the board and raised my hand in support of that. And so in thinking of all the work that you've done to this point, never did I imagine that we would get to this point where our families would be challenged in this way. So I think my question is more from the professional development standpoint. I was going to ask the question of, it seems like there are so many staff in your office that have a specialized expertise. Are there any safeguards that are put in place, or what are we doing to ensure that when someone leaves that there's not that gap that's there? I heard you say that you need some more support, or you need more specialization from staff in the area of McKinney-Vento. So what's the plan to get people up to speed? How are you going about finding individuals that have that expertise, since it seems to be so limited?
Yes, thank you for that question. So the McKinney-Vento law, it's a federal act that guides our work with McKinney-Vento students. This is a protected population, and the focus and the intention is to remove barriers to education. As you can imagine, a student experiencing homelessness is experiencing all kinds of things. But the one thing we can do as a school system is ensure that they're stable at school. So that's from that lens is that we operate in my office. Federal law and state guidelines recommend, especially for a district our size, they recommend a dedicated full-time McKinney-Vento liaison or specialist to help lead this work. And right now in my office, I have a McKinney-Vento unit where there's 5 of us doing 20% of the work, which is, we've been managing so far to some extent, but there is so much more we can be doing to support our McKinney-Vento population. We work very closely with Steve Neff and the PPWs who are on the ground at schools helping us enroll and support our McKinney-Vento students. But we could be engaging the community more, engaging McKinney-Vento parents more to support them, offering more resources for McKinney-Vento students. So I've been advocating for a dedicated full-time staff member who can take the lead in our office, and of course the unit would continue supporting. Because not only are we building school capacity around McKinney-Vento, we're supporting the students directly, of which we have 1,400 enrolled and growing. Every week the number is growing. We're supporting the families and the community, but I'm also managing a McKinney-Vento grant, and we coordinate with Jessa to do a summer camp. So there's a lot of work that's being done for McKinney-Vento students, and having a dedicated specialist would be wonderful to continue that work and expand even further.
Okay. So if I heard you correctly, there are 1,400 McKinney-Vento students.
1467,
staff.
it keeps growing. Yes, I could have an exact number for you.
Okay. And then, I'm going back to Councilmember Jawando's question earlier. I think that, I can't remember the exact question, but I know you talked about there's going to be, like, you lost some ETCs, correct? And we had that chart where you showed all of the schools, and there were like 5 schools that had like 500, or like 2 schools. It was Montgomery Blair and Gaithersburg that had over 500 students. And then we had about 5 that had over 400. So when you said that some of them are going to be reduced or taken away from the schools, I'm making the assumption that the way that you're going to go is to the schools where it has the least number of
Yes.
students, like in the 200. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. So talk about, and then you also, I don't want to get in the weeds. I was about to get in the weeds. How often are you providing professional development to your staff? Does that need to be on a ongoing basis, or is it a certain time of the year? Because based on you talking about that there are more complexities that are coming about with our students, do you find that staff needs to be updated more often than what you normally would have, just
Yes.
to be able to get up to speed?
Yes. So depending on the work that we're providing PD on, for example, we provide professional development on our credit evaluations. We meet with counselors. We go out to schools to make sure that, because it's one thing for us to issue comprehensive, precise credit evaluations, but the schools will be getting these evaluations to make sure that they're doing right by the students, and transferring the credits and scheduling them correctly and planning for graduation. So there's PD there that has to happen, making sure they're placed in the right grade and that's respected. But the mental health component of the PD, we collaborate with consultants and other partners who come in and do that important work. So depending on what the work is, we have different kinds of professional development that we do. But again, with everything going on and the needs going up, it's something that you have to pick and choose sometimes, and PD can always be offered more consistently and more often.
Can I add something to that also that is important, because you talked about our team? Our team meets on a regular basis as well, because what's happening, what's working in up county might be working down, might need to be told down county. And because our team is stretched out and we're all specialized at different things, we want to make sure that our specific team, our 1IAE team, is up to date and on the same page. So not only do we provide the professional development at the school level, ourselves are sharing what's working, what's not working. Everything changes on a month-to-month basis or day-to-day basis. That we're able to meet. Our leadership team meets at least once a week or every other week to make sure that we're all on the same page, so that our team is aware and has all the tools they need, especially as the number of ETCs have gone down. We have to be extra sure that everybody has the tools that they need.
All right. So if you all didn't know, I'm on government and operations as well. So I'm asking questions. And you know what? Did I catch that? Is there a notary on staff?
We have a few certified intake specialists who can notarize on the spot, yes.
Okay. All right. So that concludes my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a couple of things we asked for as follow-up. I would just say, though we're not scheduled to have another session, if there's things we need to know as through the course of the year, throughout the budget process, I know your team will be present at our budget forums, which we just announced, and we always welcome that. And just keep us posted. I want to thank Grace Rivera Oven, the president of the board, who's here as well, joined us. We know this is just extremely difficult but important work, especially now, and just want to thank you and your teams for all you're doing. And we certainly want to support these student populations that have a lot of needs in their families. So thank you. And with that, we'll move to our next item.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So our next item is an update on the anti-racist system audit. We've got Dr. Nia Hamlet. I'm going to ask, I see you, Mr. Moran, I'm going to ask you to come down too, if you don't mind, since to give some backup here to Dr. Hamlet, and welcome to the committee, and we're glad you're here. So is there anything staff wants to say by way of introduction?
Just one note of privilege, if you would. I just wanted to let the council members know that my former student from Seneca Valley High School is now doing this important work for the system. Couldn't be more proud.
That is a very important note. So we will hold you accountable to everything that's said today. No.
Absolutely. And her executive director also here is a former student from Seneca Valley as well.
There you go.
Yep.
Screaming Eagles.
There you go.
There we go. Well, Dr. Hamlet, welcome. Ms. Moran, welcome. So we'll turn it over to you. I'll just say at the top, I know there's been a lot of transitions in MCPS over the last couple of years. We had an update about this almost a year ago now. And I know you started July 1, so kind of halfway through. So we know that the position is still not filled, that Mr. Alston, I know it's kind of slightly different, but that Director of Equity. So we'll talk about all that. But this is, especially given the last topic and what we're seeing in our schools and the results of the audit itself, this work is super, super important. So I think we need to get an update and have a clear idea of where we're going and what the path forward is. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. I know you have a presentation.
Absolutely. Good morning again, Chair Jawando, Council Members Mink and Evans, and County staff. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to have my partner up here with me. Today's update is anchored in a simple principle. Anti-racist commitments only move when they are grounded in written expectations, monitored for implementation, and tied to outcomes. This briefing focuses on how the Anti-Racist System Audit Action Plan has moved from planning into implementation, and where we must strengthen transparency, accountability, and leadership to keep the work advancing. I will be candid about what has progressed, where implementation has stalled, and what must be strengthened to ensure this work does not fall through the cracks. Next slide, please. Before I walk through the specifics, I do want to ground us or ground this update in how the Division of Equity and Organizational Development approaches this work. We're working to reestablish promising practices and expectations while also modeling at every level of the organization that this is about whether the work is happening, how we know, and who is responsible, not just whether we agree with the goals. That lens is what guides everything that you will see today and hear today. And first, I'll also provide a clear status update on the implementation of the Anti-Racist Audit Action Plan, what has advanced, and where the work remains. Second, I'll highlight or show the audit commitments and how they're aligned with our current strategic plan and increasingly to school improvement plans while being transparent about where that alignment is still uneven. And finally, I'll describe the accountability structures in place, the evidence of current progress, and the specific steps needed to strengthen transparency, ownership, and follow through. And with that lens in mind, we will start with an overview of where the work lives in the action plan or tracker. That includes next steps, because without visible, updated accountability or a tool to show that, it becomes difficult to demonstrate our progress and identify where that work has stalled. So at a high level, you'll see here on this slide, the most significant shift since January of 2025 is that equity work is being organized and monitored more intentionally rather than relying on informal efforts or parallel initiatives. We're working to place this work inside structures that require regular review and follow through. The anti-racist audit action steps are being embedded into existing accountability structures, as I mentioned, most notably the strategic plan scorecards and increasingly our school improvement plans. This does reflect a deliberate move away from treating the audit as a time-limited initiative and toward making these commitments part of how the system is expected to operate. Also, central office reorganization is helping to strengthen coherence through equity instruction, also with human resources and talent management, as well as through our specialized student support services. And that alignment really matters, but alignment alone does not ensure consistent practice. So essentially, the work is moving from intention to infrastructure, but that shift does require continued attention and accountability. So what has changed is that we're working deliberately to embed the audit action steps in the core planning and accountability mechanisms of the system. Our strategic plan goals and objectives, the school improvement plans, and this is really intentional systems work. We're being careful not to treat equity as an add-on or parallel initiative, but really to embed and in some cases re-embed equity within the structures, core values, and key strategic actions that drive our decision making. At the strategic plan level, there are now designated division level owners responsible for implementation and monitoring, and this moves the work from shared aspiration to named responsibility. So we specifically name that each division or department who's responsible. At the school and operational level, our cross-functional team supported by instructional specialists from the Department of System-Wide Equity as part of the team in partnership with our Division of School Leadership and Improvement Directors who lead those teams are helping to coordinate efforts, track our progress, and also reduce siloed implementation. And this represents an important shift toward shared accountability rather than isolated effort. At the same time, the work is very much still in the early stages. As we revisit the SIP process for next year, we're being intentional about how equity is embedded without reverting to overly complex structures. Rather than returning to prior models that required extensive data stories and root cause analyses, which actually some schools still choose to use, and recognizing that our SIPs are 3-year plans, they still ground their work in those data stories. But we're also working with our cross-functional teams to embed clear, grounded equity questions into the school improvement process. So for example, what is our data telling us and who is experiencing burden or benefit as a result of our current practices? So we're trying to ask ourselves those key questions and embed that into the school improvement planning process.
On the school, the designated division level owners for implementation and monitoring, can you just explain who that is, what that means?
Sure.
Give an example like you just did for the school improvement plan.
Sure, absolutely. So we're in the process of really solidifying our strategies and tactics. So what are we going to do to reach these goals and objectives that are in the strategic plan? So each goal area, we have representatives across divisions and departments who take each goal, each objective, and identify their identified points of contact for their respective division. So that's where you'll see a lot of that cross-departmental collaboration. So for example, with our culture, like culture and belonging, goal 3, You might see members from our Department of System-Wide Equity. You'll certainly see folks from Dr. Moran's shop, as well as Nikki Porter's shop. I'm sorry.
I almost put that up yesterday, too.
But so you'll see that cross collaboration, and we name specific people or leaders of departments that are responsible for collaborating on those goals.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. So with that, also with our reporting structure, progress is reviewed through those reporting cycles connected to both the strategic plan and the school improvement plan. So that it reinforces the work and makes sure that it's not just episodic, but ongoing and expected at both the system level and the school level. I'll also add, before we go on to the next slide, I've long believed that, and continue to believe, that if equity is really going to drive and expand our vision as a system, it must be embedded in every action that we take and considered as we solve problems of practice. And when equity, anti-racist practices, and social justice action are truly embedded within core systems, we don't have to name it constantly. The system models it through how decisions are made and monitored. So that said, embedding the work into systems only matters if progress is visible, right? So this brings me directly to the action plan tracker. This is where the accountability work shows up in the substance of the strategic plan. The anti-racist audit action plan is no longer parallel to district priorities. It's intentionally integrated within them. The audit findings directly inform current priorities related to culture and belonging, workforce diversity, staff conditions, and leadership capacity. And you can see this clearly in the strategic plan goals and objectives, particularly goals 3 and 4, which I'll talk about in a moment. And this integration reflects a deliberate shift away from charter-based action plans, which were temporary kind of project-style structures that were created to respond to the audit findings, rather than permanent system accountability mechanisms. So there's certainly still work to be done in this area, but that shift is now toward embedding equity commitments inside strategic plan scorecards, the school improvement plans, and our cross-functional team structure. The intent was really to reduce fragmentation and ensure equity and anti-racist practices are addressed through those accountability mechanisms, not optional initiatives, which systems frequently kind of fall into when it comes to equity work. At the same time, we do have to be honest with ourselves that as a system, that rhetoric or using buzzwords or integration alone is not enough. Implementation does currently remain uneven in practice, which is to be expected with a district this large and with so much leadership turnover, but it's incumbent upon us to really recognize and act on the fact that this work requires continued refinement, clearer enforcement, and stronger monitoring to realize the commitments reflected in the strategic plan and the anti-racist action plan. With central office reorganization, again, that goal is really to reduce fragmentation across equity, instruction, human resources, and school leadership and student support. The goal is to improve coherence and stronger implementation, but we're really still in the process of getting there. The reorganization has improved alignment across those divisions and departments, and that really matters when it comes to equity work, recognizing that it cuts across all of those functions. So as a result, roles and responsibilities are becoming clearer, particularly around who supports schools, who monitors data, and who is responsible for interventions when disparities persist. At the same time, as previously mentioned, structure alone is not sufficient. So consistent practice still depends on leadership clarity, shared expectations, and the ability to act on the data and what the data is telling us. This is why dedicated system equity leadership is critical to reset a clear equity vision, identify gaps across divisions and schools, and guide consistent implementation. Without that leadership, alignment risks becoming coordination without accountability. And so I just want to give you a concrete example before we move on. So kind of how this work shows up in practice. One example that's beginning to take shape is the collaboration between my division and Dr. Moran's division, where I have some equity specialists who are collaborating with our Director of Student Conduct and Appeals. So, for instance, our equity specialist, Dr. Daryl Howard, and our Director of Student Conduct and Appeals, Dr. Norman Coleman, lead reoccurring work sessions with our DSLI directors and associate superintendents focused specifically on discipline disproportionality. And so together they review 10-day and expulsion recommendation data. They calibrate expectations for how central office leaders support school leaders and identify schools requiring targeted intervention, coaching, and support. So this is how our equity specialists also work alongside CFT members and school leadership using data to really tailor those strategies, monitor trends, and address disproportionality rather than just reacting after harm has occurred or after the data is telling us something really concerning.
CFT.
I'm sorry, cross-functional teams.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Reorganization has really created those conditions for coherence, but dedicated equity leadership is what will turn those conditions into consistent practice. So what the committee heard in January 2025 reflected a planning phase. At that time, MCPS, from what I understand, was still finalizing and working on the strategic plan, gathering feedback, and standing up temporary structures to inform the work. Since then, the strategic plan development is complete. The system has shifted from planning to implementation and monitoring, and temporary committees formed during the planning phase have transitioned into cross-functional teams focused on execution and problem solving. Community input gathered through multiple engagement channels directly informed the goals or final goals and objectives adopted by the board, which evolved from what was shared in earlier drafts. As a result, anti-racist commitments are now being embedded in the strategic plan scorecards. This is still very much a work in progress, particularly as strategies and tactics that I mentioned earlier are developed and refined. Targets are refined and baselines are validated. And we're also beginning to see those commitments in the in school improvement plans. However, this too is not yet consistent or as consistent as we would like to see across our 211 schools. Making this work really visible, written, and monitored through the SIPs is necessary as a next step to ensure school level accountability as well. And I know that Dr. Moran's division is continuing to work through that process. So in short, we've really moved from planning what should happen to building structures needed to ensure it does happen. So goals 3 and 4 are where the anti-racist audit commitments primarily live in the strategic plan. And I want to start here with goal 3. This is where audit findings related to culture, belonging, discipline, equity, and hate bias prevention are most directly reflected. Importantly, action steps in this area are now being implemented through written and monitored systems, not informal or discretionary efforts. Those systems include those scorecards and school improvement plans and required professional learning and established protocols such as our hate bias response. We're also seeing early progress in the form of clearer ownership, more defined timelines, and stronger cross-functional collaboration. At the same time, as I mentioned previously, the implementation remains uneven. Discipline data continues to be a critical indicator, and what the data currently tells us is not uniform success, but variation tied to leadership, professional learning needs, and implementation fidelity at the school level. And that variability reinforces why monitoring, leadership, and visible accountability are essential to sustaining progress in this area. With Goal 4, that the audit commitments related to workforce diversity, working conditions, leadership development, and professional learning. Professional learning aligned to anti-racist and equity-centered practice is required and continuing to expand across roles. However, participation alone is not enough to achieve the outcomes the audit calls for. And so the next phase of this work is really strengthening the connection between professional learning, day-to-day practice, and measurable outcomes, particularly how learning shows up in leadership decisions, classroom practice, and school-level results. As with Goal 3, we also see promising structures in place, but implementation and impact do vary. And closing that gap is central to the work ahead. Next slide, please. Cross-functional teams were designed to reduce silos and create shared ownership for equity outcomes that no single office or department can solve alone. As of August 2025, our equity specialists are now embedded across multiple teams, working alongside instructional leaders, student support, and operational staff to promote consistent expectations, required professional learning, and align protocols through an equity lens and approach. And this model is beginning to support more consistent policy implementation and shared accountability, particularly around discipline, instruction, climate, restorative justice, and student support. At the same time, capacity remains a real challenge. Equity specialists are supporting multiple teams, and the model requires continued refinement to ensure depth of impact rather than just surface level participation and being named as a member of a cross-functional team. Next slide, please. So MCPS has significantly expanded equity-focused professional learning, including onboarding and induction, leadership learning, and PDO courses. Satisfaction data and self-reported learning data are collected and reviewed, and participation has increased across roles. Last year, this committee rightly asked an essential question, which was, how does professional learning show up in our outcomes? And that question remains central. Participation alone, as I've mentioned many times, is not enough. So we're now focused on strengthening accountability by better connecting professional learning to school improvement planning, our discipline data, and climate indicators, so that professional learning translates into changed practice and improved outcomes. Next slide. So the work has not stopped. I would say, if I had to describe it in my own words, I would say in some areas it has stalled and in other areas it has shifted. But visibility and consistency have not been strong enough. When expectations are not clearly written, monitored, and publicly tracked, it becomes easier for work to stall and fall through the cracks, even when there is good intent. So restoring transparency, strengthening school improvement integration, and filling dedicated system-wide equity leadership roles are critical next steps to sustain momentum. And the way I like to describe this is long arc systems change. It requires sustained governance alignment, clear ownership, and realistic expectations for how culture and practice shift over time. And as we go on to the next slide, as Mr. Prouty said, so I want to kind of paint this picture or tell you this story. 15-year-old Naya in Doug Prouty's 10th grade English class could certainly be found in the data that you see here today. Suspended from school multiple times, not the best grades, right? Growing up in a single parent household. Being able to really shift from individual or interpersonal equity work with great teachers like Doug Prouty, or shifting from culturally responsive teaching by great teachers like Doug Prouty. This work is really about the institutional and structural long arc systems change work that has to happen. And that's where I think we've fallen short as a system and need to get, like I said, kind of re-embed some of those things that we've already had in place, but also really revisit what the structural systems change work looks like. Because at the core of this work, it is really about anchoring anti-racist commitments through those written expectations, monitoring, and outcomes. With that, I will stop here, and I'll be happy to have Peter answer any questions that you have.
Yeah, that's why I brought him up, so you can have a little deflection. Thank you for that update, and thank you for sharing kind of where things are and being candid about where things aren't. Dr. Moran, do you have anything to add before we get into the questions? Till we ask every question of you? No, just if you don't have to.
No, I think that the one thing I wanted to say that Dr. Hamlet has brought a wonderful vision to Montgomery County Public Schools, where I think all of us have learned a great deal from her leadership, but not just. I think she's moved us from a rhetoric place of talking about things to actually doing things and making it integrated into all we do, as opposed to this just kind of one-off where we have, this anti-racist audit over here, but bringing it into operational discussions, academic discussions, school culture discussions, so that it's becoming more a part of who we are, as opposed to something we talk about and have a monitoring plan that we report out on it every so often.
I appreciate that. There's always the challenge of, particularly with equity or when you're trying to correct historical wrongs, to kind of silo that work. And the benefit to some in that is that, I have a place I can go to say, is it or is not happening? But the big challenge is that it's siloed and it's not integrated into the entire system. The challenge with the integration approach of it should be embedded in everything we do is you really have to be striving continuously for making sure it's happening everywhere, that you have accountability mechanisms in place, that people are taking it seriously, and just all the things. It's a lot harder to do that, but that's what has to happen for it to not be uneven everywhere and based on like having one good leader at a school or one good person who cares about it here. And I think that's, admittedly, as you've said, that's where we are in a lot of places. So I have a couple questions, and I'll turn to colleagues here. Let's just talk about one of the elephants in the room here, the Director of System-Wide Equity position, which has been vacant for over a year. What is the update on that? And then in addition to not only when are we going to have that person, because you mentioned that we need that, you need that, right, to make sure this work is happening consistently. And what were the challenges, looking back a little bit, this would be to either one of you, on why we're here this long and we haven't been able to fill that position?
Sure, certainly. So the position has been posted for several months. We've gone through a few rounds of interviews and certainly screening applicants, actually a couple of hundred applicants. I would say that our goal is to have someone named by February of this year. And hopefully we'll be able to take a name to our school board in the next couple of weeks. With that said, I would say one of the biggest challenges is, finding highly qualified candidates who are ready to do the work and recognize the risks and rewards associated with doing the work. We've also switched up our hiring process a bit, and in the sense that it's really rigorous, particularly with this position. We screen applicants, but we also give potential applicants or candidates a very robust performance task that they have to complete. And then a representative from Human Resources and I have done a number of candidate huddles. So spending some time with candidates to really kind of parse out what they have on paper, not just on their task and on their resume, but really to hear and feel their energy as it relates to this work. And then certainly we have a very intense panel process with our first round of over 20 people that includes internal and external partners in that process. So with that said, it has been quite the journey. I will say with that, I am ready for that person to begin and very much have their first steps outlined, which really starts with some of what I talked about today. We need to take our strategic plan. We need to take our school improvement plan kind of landing page with all of the resources and the direction that we're sending our schools in. And then we also need to take the anti-racist audit and find where are the gaps, right? And that is the first step for the Director of Equity, because that's where the work needs to begin.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll be waiting with bated breath for that announcement from the board, and appreciate the candor there. You mentioned just a couple times, which I've really appreciated, the accountability and things on paper. I just think it's a horrible message to the community and me as a parent, like just to not have anything updated on that thing for a whole year, right? And you explained why, but on the tracker, and it just sends a really poor message to the community when we're saying we paid all this money for this audit, we've got these findings that are hanging out there, and then a year passes, and then, and last year this was the case. The last updates to the tracker were because we had the session here and people were scrambling to update the tracker, just to be frank. Prior to that, it had been, a long period of time since it had been updated. And that's not to say work hasn't been happening. Like you said, I know there is some work that's been happening, but I just think I just really want to emphasize as we hire the person, as we move forward, the communication to parents, to the community, the ability to track things, to have things on paper is just so important to this work, to know what's happening, to get feedback throughout the process. So I want you to just, if you can talk a little bit about how you're thinking that will happen. I know you've said the school improvement plans, but just a little bit more about how you see that, the tracking and communication and accountability happening around this work.
Sure. So we've started some of that work by creating a crosswalk between our current strategic plan and the anti-racist audit. And so my thought is that we need to take those documents and, again, identify where the gaps are and then modify the current tracker. And even if it's an embedded link within, or like on our strategic plan page or landing page, but also certainly having that on our equity website as well, so that we can clearly monitor, but also update. And I hate to use the word dashboard, it's like a 4-letter word for me, but some type of dashboard that's a modified tracker, so that it's not, as you mentioned earlier, separate and apart from the strategic plan work, but where you can see where it's deeply embedded into the strategic plan, and also the things that need to continue, the long arc systems work that needs to continue, that's directly pulled from the anti-racist action plan.
Appreciate that. Just one specific question, then I'm going to go to Councilmember Evans and Mink in that order. You mentioned the 10 PDO, the professional development courses, and you had them outlined in the slide. And you also mentioned, which I appreciated, that it's not enough to just attend one of those. We have to see how it's actually impacting or not the work and the experience in the classroom and at the school and level. That being said, attendance is a good first step. Are these what percentage of staff have attended these?
So I don't know the exact percentage. I can tell you from the central service employees, over 1,000 people engaged in learning, and data is showing better understanding of racism and some of the anti-racism work that was started years ago. We're really still working on how we lead others across the district in anti-racist work as part of how they function every day. From what I understand, with the central service employees training or professional learning, that we're in the 3rd year of implementation. I actually went through it myself as a new central services employee, so I was looking at it from multiple lenses. And then the district also, and Dr. Moran may be able to talk about this as well, went through leader learning, where principals and assistant principals with a team of 2 teacher leaders, similar to the central service learning with a slant towards instructional leadership. So we're really getting into goal 1 of our strategic plan and some of the equity and anti-racist practices commitments that are from there. But that was mandatory for all leaders, and I believe we're in the 2nd year of implementation for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Councilmember Jawando, while it may sound somewhat of a like micromanagement type accountability around all these trainings, Dr. Taylor has made it a point to have people first attest that they are, one, present and taking them as opposed to just a sign-in sheet, and actually completing an assessment at the completion of the professional learning, that he actually is, when people have not passed it, had us bring them back in for a remediation of professional learning. So I think that is while that's some kind of heavy accountability in some cases.
I think it's totally appropriate.
Yeah, we recently did it with the code of conduct and had all of our administrators complete an assessment at the conclusion of that, and then had to bring back quite a few for a retraining and then another assessment.
I think we assess our students and grade them in the school system on things that they've learned.
We do indeed.
So I think we should probably do that in this context too. So the percent, I would like to just have a little, and if you have to come back, but I do think it's really important from an accountability mechanism to know the percent of school staff by category who have participated in what trainings, who hasn't, who passed the test, who didn't. Again, we don't need to know the names of people, obviously, but just we're a large enough school system that you could aggregate that data. I just think that's important I hope you're tracking it. And it sounds like in this case, for example, with those trainings you are, and then you're doing something with it. I just think that's a real important part of this.
So one thing that all of us know is that when you hold a voluntary equity training, the people that commonly attend are those that are invested and believe deeply in equity. And so one of the things that we are working with principals on, in terms of the teacher evaluation process or supporting service evaluation process or principal evaluation process, is in their evaluation requiring it as an action item for them to take one of those specific trainings.
So right now it's voluntary.
Correct.
So you're saying you're going to change that so it's mandatory that they take one?
So mandatory for employees that demonstrate that either through a infraction or through
so if there's
an
a complaint
incident
or
that
something, it can be used as a
requirement
you have to do this
as part of
but
their
not on the
evaluation.
front end, not as a prevention. What would be the reason that we don't say everyone has to take it?
I mean, so I think that's something we certainly need to discuss. But currently, right now, they're all voluntary. I think the leader learning ones on the professional learning days that we've had are mandatory for teachers, but those are more broad.
Right.
I think the ones that were shown during the slide are ones that we've specifically required teachers as a result of certain incidents to complete as either a resolution to a disciplinary component or as a part of their evaluation through their teaching practices that they demonstrate that they need to take that training.
Well, I would highly encourage colleagues on the board and in the system to consider making it mandatory for everybody. It just seems that that's what we should, because it's going to take some time for this stuff to embed and get. We know some people are coming to it, like you said, with preconceived notions or why am I doing this, and all. Those are people who I think, in my view, need to be in it the most, and benefit from that, being in community with others that might have similar views. So appreciate that. Let me see what else. The other thing, rigorous coursework is the other question I had. Are you all tracking enrollment of rigorous coursework for Black and Brown students, and where would that be embedded into the overall work?
Yeah, so we do have access to that data. We haven't had it embedded in any specific tracker or anything, but I think those are the type of data points and metrics that I think need to be revisited so that we're incorporating them into this modified tracker that I was referring to.
I would agree.
But yes,
That was a
yes. And then again,
suggestion
connected to
/question.
goal 1 of the strategic plan.
Of course. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. I'm turn to Councilmember Evans.
Sure. Great to see you, Dr. Hamlet. My second time meeting you.
Yes,
Dr. Moran, good to see you. I see Ms. Porter and Dr. Coleman in the audience. So we're here. So I appreciate that you started off being honest with, I feel like I'm going to steal most of what, or reiterate most of what Councilmember Jawando said, that we're not at the point that we had hoped that we would be. In particular, when we started this process, many community members thought that this would be a standalone, but as Councilmember Jawando said, it elevates the work by including it in the school improvement plan. So when you talk about your cross-functional teams, take me to the school improvement plan. Because what I'm thinking is like cross collaboration. How are we going to bring parents or community members into the fold? I know particularly what would happen is that at your school improvement team meetings, maybe your PTA leader or someone would be able to come and sit in on the monthly meetings. But I know we've changed it to where you might have a summer planning meeting. Is there a way for us to ensure that we're building, we're including the community, but we're building that trust, that transparency, and that accountability? Because I think a lot of our families and our communities, they want to be able to touch and feel and see. And some of what you're talking about today, I think that there are people that want to be able to provide some input, share some insight, but just feel like that this won't be forgotten. And then thinking about our students who our Black students, our Latino students who have been performing as well, that we do see those changes happening. So can you tell me how we plan to include or infuse the community into some of this?
Absolutely. So all of our schools are required to have 3 public community-oriented school improvement plan monitoring meetings. They just completed the first one. The deadline to complete that was the middle of December. During that meeting, they reported out on progress on their school improvement plan goals. Much of it was specific to any kind of disproportionality or relative to the opportunity gap. Climate survey data that included, of course, staff and community, but honed in on the student climate data results. And we have also had directed our principals to send out those slides following the meeting so that people at least received the data and information relative to their progress, or in some cases lack thereof, and what their plan was in terms of the instructional strategies that they were going to be implementing in their school. I've heard from many parents who've appreciated that, because also what's come with it is resources for how they can support at home. And also just resources that are being utilized in school so that they mirror what a teacher would be doing and a parent has that at home. So we always, get very technical in Montgomery County Public Schools with educational jargon a lot of times. So trying to also make those that they are, parent friendly, so that we're speaking the same language. They're going to have another one of those in February, following the completion of the second quarter. So like a mid-semester one, where all 211 schools again will have that meeting. We're really trying to a traditional structure that we're trying to break down is one of only inviting our high-profile parent leaders to then put them as responsible to share out to the community, or not share out to the community, what happens at that meeting. So by making it more public, those people can be there for the ILT component, but when you go to the community, you invite anyone, you share it out. This has been a big shift in practice to make this a requirement for all of our schools. In previous years, it's unfortunately, it's kind of one of those things that became somewhat diminished during our out of time as a result of the pandemic and coming back in person, and principal turnover. It used to be a best practice to do that. Now it's a standardized expectation. So I think that is one way that we're really partnering with the community and being very transparent about results. I will say in a lot of cases that has put some principals, and we've had to coach them, because we have not seen gains in some of our schools, which has led to some very courageous conversations with community about what they're doing internally in the school, and the true partnership and support that they need from their parent community to accelerate progress with student learning.
Oh, very good. That's new. I've not heard the system doing that.
Yeah,
Okay,
and the
very good.
CFTs in many cases, especially at some of our schools that we have identified as tier 3, meaning they need the most intensive support, our CFT members have actually gone to those evening meetings to, one, make sure that parents know who they are because they're in their child's school frequently, but also to contribute to the discussion because of their specialized nature, whether it's an equity specialist or it's a literacy specialist, that they're there to provide that view that not a principal doesn't always have that level of specialization.
Very good. Okay. And I heard Dr. Hamlin said that dashboards are a bad word, but I was going to ask you, like, are there going to be dashboards? But you mentioned that. Talk about in trying to do this work, if you can say, what could be some possible budget implications? Because if I remember correctly, I know you said that you've embedded the equity specialists into the teams, but how many equity specialists are there? I didn't think there were that many to be able to continue to do this work with
Correct.
Fidelity.
So currently we have 6 equity specialists. We'll continue to have 6 next year. And then we have 1 coordinator for hate bias education and prevention. That is currently a grant-funded position, so we're hoping that that position may be able to be picked up by local next fiscal year. Right now, from a supporting schools and structural standpoint, that every equity specialist serves at least 2 cross-functional teams. And right now, that coordinator of the hate bias prevention work also has the responsibility of the hate bias work across the district and 1 CFT. So we're hoping that we'll be able to kind of make some shifts in our structure next year so that the hate bias prevention work can be her sole responsibility, and then each equity specialist would continue to have 2 cross-functional teams.
Okay, so 6 don't sound like enough for the entire district and do the work with Fidelity the way that we need to, especially when you hear that there can be some unevenness across the school system. Is there intention or the thought to make somebody else in the building a specialist or an expert to be able to help with the work, or how do you? So tell me how you envision.
Right now, the approach that we've taken is having our equity specialists collaborate with other members of the cross-functional team so that they can kind of be their eyes and ears, but also helping to build capacity in those folks from an equity lens. And so there's a lot of, which is the purpose of the teams, but a lot of cross-departmental collaboration. So again, for example, and Daryl Howard is one that comes to mind. I know that he works very closely with the professional learning specialist on his 2 cross-functional teams. And then we also have equity specialists that kind of have their niche or specialty area. So again, I'll use Dr. Howard, who does a lot of work in working with Black and brown boys and the disparities that we see in their student performance data and discipline data. And so that doesn't mean that Dr. Howard can only work with the schools within his area, but we often find that our folks are being stretched thin because there will be schools outside of his cross-functional teams that request his support when they're looking at their data through their school improvement planning process. So that has been a challenge, but something that we're just trying to piecemeal together until we can see the benefits of having additional FTEs in that area.
Yeah.
I was just going to add, I think, and it goes back to what Councilmember Jawando said about the trainings and ensuring that they're mandatory. In-person training, where you're receiving it directly from the person that is the specialist, and we're giving a lot of love to Dr. Howard today. Hopefully, hopefully he's listening. But Dr. Howard,
Someone will tell him.
Dr. Howard is providing that professional learning for Black and brown boys specifically around the learning and engagement strategies, but around really the disproportionality in disciplinary that we're trying really hard to address. And we have the ability to receive that directly from Dr. Howard. So trying to figure out the time component where professional learning can be delivered as opposed to through the PDO and an online course, but directly to our teachers, and not just when, and I think this is something that Dr. Hamlet and I have been working a lot together on, is it's similar to almost like security, right? Like, so in a situation happens at a school, we come together, we deploy a team, we provide professional learning, but it's after the fact of something happening at a school, where if we had been able to find the time, resources to provide it in a preventative nature over the summer, before the school year, during a professional learning day, that we'd make a lot more progress. So I think there's some structures that aren't necessarily monetary that we need to work through about how we just get to teachers, and not necessarily through a trainer of trainer model, because again, when we have some wonderful people, it's so impactful when they're right in front of you delivering that professional learning.
One more, then I'll pass it over to Councilmember Mink. So is one way the new employee orientation? I mean, will you do it there?
Yes.
That's like 800 or more people, like at one time. Right?
Yes, so those are, the trainings are embedded within the NEO training already. I think another piece that we are missing is that we can't just focus on the one workshop
Yep.
or one point in time sit and get, because this is really about like core beliefs and practices, right? And so I always say you can't just teach equity, right? It
That's
has
right.
to be embedded, keep using that word. But I would say that really equity maturity is not choosing anti-bias, anti-hate, or choosing culture responsive teaching, or choosing anti-racism systems work, right? It's really about sequencing and integrating all three within that systems work and really setting the direction and accountability. And the way that we do that is, yes, with additional staff that can support, because
Sure.
our district is as large as it is and the implementation is uneven, as we've mentioned, but also so that we're building capacity in people, and that equity work is everyone's work and
Sure.
responsibility, whether equity is in your title or not.
I'm gonna give a shout out to Jill Sanders. She was a former principal, and at the time I was on the board, I went to her school, and she was so creative with how she used like half days, or just found ways to support her team, right? So I don't know. That's your job, right? But just looking forward to continuing to have the conversation, because it's so important. And like the Councilmember Gerando said, we spend a lot of money. We know we want to do it, but we've got to get it done, and let everyone know that that did not go to waste, and that we're trying to do good work in the school system. So please, please, please let us just know what those needs look like, so that we can be able to get that work done. 'Cause I do know that there are budget implications.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Evans. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. So ultimately, this work is about getting the right results, right? We have to be able to see the results of this work reflected in the data, because the data, frankly, has been poor for a long time, and has really demonstrated, the need for us, as we've all acknowledged together, the need for us to dive much deeper and go a lot harder in this work to close those disparities and address the shortcomings that we have had, and the inequities that we have had historically as a community, as a school system, all of that, to make sure that we're serving everybody properly. And so I'll just say that whenever we have these updates, it would be great to have the data, have numbers in front of us, so that we can clearly see where we are making gains and where we are falling short. So, for example, if we're talking about we've made reference to disciplinary data, to suspension data, et cetera. It would be great for us to be able to be looking at that as we're having that conversation. I think that also really creates that accountability and that transparency. At a previous meeting, September 2025, when we were talking about the code of conduct, and I raised some concerns at that time about the revision that had happened there, and additional discretion that is still in the code of conduct, that there's not. We're not mandating, for example, that there are restorative practices taken, as a result of, this or that type of disciplinary infraction. There's discretion there, and there's discretion given under certain circumstances where there seems to be inequities built in. So, for example, principals are given discretion to move from one tier to another tier if, for example, students have a history based on a history of past infractions. Well, right there, if we know that our previous system had inequities baked in which caused these disparities, and we're saying you can apply that history, the student history, now to use your discretion as administrators to move students from one tier to another tier. you have baked in the past inequity into this new system already. There's also, I don't remember the exact wording offhand, but another way that another reason that discretion can be applied to move students from one tier to another tier for a disciplinary incident is based on something like, disruptive behavior, which we know, that's like red flag number one. That's going to bake in inequities also. So when we had this conversation in September, and I will note also that we don't need to rehash this whole thing, but I will note again that the code of conduct process, I know that there were community members and community groups that were reaching out, that were trying to get their hands on drafts before it was finalized so they could provide additional feedback. And there was not enough communication back and forth. And maybe if there had been, some of these fixes would have taken place. But I mention that also because just in this work in general, that communication and that feedback, as my colleagues have noted, that engagement with the community is so core, is so essential to this work. And so we need to do better than we did in that process moving forward. But at that September 2025 meeting, when we talked about the code of conduct, and I flagged, and others also flagged concerns, what we said at that time was, we'll see what's in the data. Well, in the Board of Ed meeting on October 30th, we learned that in-school suspensions had increased 80%, comparing September 2024 to September 2025. Out of school, that had increased by 28.7% over the same time period. And of course, we know that when we break this down by race, that the disparities are really unacceptable, that we are not serving our Black and African American students well consistently across the district in these different areas, and that's reflected in the data as well. So could you speak to those disparities and how you're thinking about what changes or improvements might need to be made in regards to the code of conduct specifically and or otherwise as well? But when we look at the data from this year so far, and when we look at the continuation and in some cases expansion of disparities, what we are learning from that and how we're going to move forward.
Yeah, so just a couple of things in response. So first off, I appreciate the feedback around the community engagement part. The one thing I do want to make sure that everyone knows, and I know that you know this, is in, I would say the last 20 years, we've never presented on the code of conduct to the board, to the county council prior to its implementation. The code of conduct is updated every year. It's a process that we go through every year, make revisions to it. Some of the things you're alluding to are not new and have been in the code of conduct for many years. So I appreciate the feedback, and we will certainly, as we go through another rendition, which we do every spring, look at the community engagement piece. But I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this is the first year that we've presented the code of conduct in a public forum, had comments on it, sought feedback. So I just want to say that. The second thing I wanted to share is, and just to make sure everyone understands.
Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt really quickly and I'm turn right back to you, but just to clarify, yes. So I think community members were asking who were associated with various committees and advisory groups, as well as other individuals, wanted to be an opportunity to give additional feedback on it in draft form prior to it being finalized and presented to the board and to the council. And also recognizing that we are, and I appreciate the investment in this from all involved, that we are working towards a more transparent and more accountable, process overall. And this is part of that. And of course, that is the reason we're able to have these conversations. And I do, recognize and appreciate that. And also the conversations are important to have. So
yeah. So thank you. So, and I think, you'll see refinements in that when we move into the spring and we start making revisions to the code of conduct again around engaging with different communities, engaging with students. We actually had the opportunity, Dr. Coleman and I met with all of our student leaders, which we invited young people for progress to, and collected feedback around the code of conduct through 2 sessions this fall. The other thing I just want to note, because disruption was thrown out, and I think it's important that we have very clear definitions about what things are and what they aren't. Mm-hmm. So disruption, when we look at our suspension data, on paper, that looks like someone disrupted the class, was loud, and was suspended from school. Disruption is actually classified also as a disruption to the safety of the school environment. So it could be a suspension that's related to a social media threat or post. It could be something that's related to a bomb threat, and that's a disruption. It could be related to something that occurs within the community, and is a disruption. So I just want to make sure that that people understand it. We're not talking just a classroom disruption. There's multiple things underneath disruption when we look at the suspension piece. The other thing I wanted to share, and it connects to the previous presentation, is that our largest level of suspension right now is around our Hispanic males. And I raise that because it's a significant concern for us, for the community, and I'm certain for each of you, because what we're tying together is what was presented this morning, and that is that we are seeing students who are responding to outside trauma in school, right? Because they're not able to really communicate about it through their behavior and actions, or they are here by themselves in some cases, or being supported by an outside family member. So I just want to raise that just to say, like, what we're engaged with Dr. Coleman is really studying each one of these. I go back to what we just spoke about in terms of like the school improvement plan and the process to bring communities together. We are seeing schools do outstanding work around racial disproportionality and suspensions. And we need to, and I was here last time with the principal from Forest Oak Middle School, who, is a school that is probably 90% black and brown, has a significantly low suspension data. Why is that different from, a school that may have entirely different demographics? So there is good work happening. I think we really need to get to a place where, and it goes back to some of the training components, where we get in front of all of our principals and continue to their professional learning around the code of conduct. I do want to just add also one place where we've seen an increase in suspensions has been around hate bias. I will say we've also seen a drop in some of our hate bias. I'm not trying to tie around the elevation of expectations around how we manage those situations, but in previous years there was a lot of just restoration without consequences for when students acted with hate bias or demonstrated a specific action. So there's a lot of work to be done around the code of conduct, and quite frankly, there's even more work to be done around the code of conduct because of things we're seeing in society, right? So the services that were described earlier, all of these things play into how students are engaged in school or not engaged in school, and how they respond to things that are happening within the community, within their neighborhoods. So there's a significant amount of work to do around this. We did anticipate an increase in suspension data when we changed the code of conduct. Like we absolutely did.
When you say change, can you be more specific?
Well, when we essentially changed things that are felonies to that are committed within a school that are now moved to a level 4 or level 5, when there was discretion around them being a level 3, or in some cases even all the way to a level 1. So what I mean by that is the examples are arson, bomb threats, attack on a staff member. Those range from level 1 to 5. So when you shrink the levels down and take was from level 1 to 5 and make it from 3 to 5, or from even 4 to 5, you're going to see an increase in suspensions, because levels 1 through 2 or 1 through 3 are no longer applicable for that behavior.
Okay, but we saw an 80% increase in in-school suspensions. I don't think that's from,
So
arsons and bomb
happy to
threats.
respond to that. One of the reasons we saw an 80% increase in in-school suspensions is because we were classifying them actually wrong. When you provide work to a student and support directly from a teacher, or IEP services during a in-school support period, it should be classified as an in-school support period, not an in-school suspension. And that was a correction we needed to make with our principals and the administrative secretaries that were reporting out on that. So that was a big part of that. And we've worked with Mrs. Jornaby and others to ensure that principals have that information, that when students are provided work and excluded from a class for a period, that it doesn't necessarily need to be classified as a in-school suspension.
Okay. I do also, to that point though, and I don't want to get derailed to, go too far afield here, but I think this is an important conversation to have also, because those kids are missing instruction. So we need to make sure that we're tracking and understanding that data as well, even if it's, it's classified a different way, but we need to make sure that we're understanding those patterns as well.
So the reason it's classified as in-school support as opposed to in-school suspension is because they are receiving instruction.
Oh, academic instruction during?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
If I
Yes,
could
Dr.
just
Hamel,
add
please.
to go back to your original question, so the data does not yet indicate uniform system-wide impact from the revisions to the Code of Conduct. What it does continue to tell us is that there's still persistent disproportionality for Black and Brown male students and students with disabilities. I just wanted to also share, previously we talked a little bit about kind of that cross-departmental collaboration and making sure that we're building capacity in people and implementing these structures and strategies regardless of whether or not you have equity in your title. Dr. Moran mentioned where we're seeing promising practices and the data is showing it. One of the things that we've been doing increasingly is having our principals, kind of that for us, by us approach, principals sharing and teaching one another some of the promising practices that they're implementing in their schools. And then I want to shout out Dr. Norman Coleman, who is our Director of Student Conduct and Appeals. He doesn't have equity in his title, right? He brings an equity lens. He brings the principal lens. He brings the restorative justice lens in his work and culture responsive practices. So he helps to kind of look at the trends, and we're working with principals. He picks up the phone or actually drives to a school and goes and sits down with a principal to talk through. Well, so tell me what you were thinking here. Once he has all of the data and information, tell me what you were thinking here. Partnering with that principal or that director to work with them through, whatever that incident is. He picks up the phone and calls parents and talks with them. The thing that I love most about the work that he's doing in that department is after a hearing, he walks families to their car and talks with them about not just the incident itself or what the consequence may be, but also how they were impacted by the system, how they were impacted by the practices in the school, or perhaps even what was said or done in that discipline hearing. So I just wanted to use that as an example to say that it goes a little bit further beyond the code of conduct or even what the discipline data is telling us, but kind of pulling in all those pieces together and making sure that we're building capacity in our school and district leaders and supporting our students.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's not going to be a code of conduct, and otherwise there's not going to be one thing, right? We know that we need improvements and changes and systemic, upgrades in a lot of different areas, and we're trying to sort all that out and make sure all that happens. And to your point about building capacity, as the reorganization conversation was unfolding, there was an acknowledgement, something that we talked about, that having somebody on the cross-functional teams who is really focused and dedicated to equity work and to restorative justice, that was really essential. And there were numerous positions that were eliminated during the reorg that were focused on those. Well, you could say eliminated, or you could say moved elsewhere, right? It's a different system now. And so this was, part of the conversation that we had was, there are positions that we are seeing that look like they're eliminated, but we have folks who are going to be focused on that, for example, on the cross-functional teams. And when we had this conversation earlier, when I was talking to Dr. Taylor in the fall, he identified the professional learning specialists as folks who that would be their primary focus: restorative justice, equity work, et cetera. I don't think that that's the current. I don't think that is the current plan. But if you could speak to what is the current plan, because it sounds like that is part of their work, part of their body of work, and really, and as we've discussed, that needs to be embedded into everything we're doing, et cetera. But somebody needs to be responsible for this with expertise in these fields, right? And so it sounds like we do have the 6 equity specialists, but unlike everybody else on the cross-functional teams, they have 2 cross-functional teams. So their capacity is much less. And so it seems like, as we think about where are we spending money as a county and as a school system, we're spending half as much on those positions and on that type of work than on some of the other specialties. So if you could So hopefully we're moving towards equity for equity work, but if you could speak to that.
Sure. So yes, we have 6 equity specialists who serve 2 cross-functional teams each. We also have 13 professional learning specialists, so they each have a cross-functional team that they're a member of. Of those 13 professional learning specialists, 7 of them were the former restorative justice specialists and had received training through IIRP, which is the International Institute for Restorative Practices, and have had a number of trainings throughout the state as well. Some of them also were trained in MCPS study circle facilitation, and 2 of them are formally trained by the state of Maryland as court mediators. So they have some extensive training within that restorative justice realm. The remaining professional learning specialists, I believe, were former learning achievement specialists. And so this goes back to my comment about building capacity. So although the restorative justice specialists, the 7 of the 13, come with this body of work and training and experience in restorative justice, that's not their sole responsibility anymore. And so they're also training each other on the instructional practices that are, research-based instructional practices, and training each other on restorative justice practices, so that any professional learning specialist has both bodies of work and experience and support. Similar to the equity specialists, schools, CFTs, they call on people that they know that have extensive training in certain areas. And then Dr. Moran and I have also collaborated with recognizing that there are some situations or instances where we need to partner with outside providers that have an even greater level of expertise when it comes to repairing harm and restorative justice work. And so we're also partnering with external partners to make sure that work continues. But we do have our professional learning specialists who have, over half of them, who have the restorative justice training.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that breakdown. And appreciate the work that's being done, and also it sounds a little piecemeal, right? I mean, if we're having the RJ specialists who are actually highly qualified RJ specialists, and we're talking about a training each other type of situation, we need better, and we deserve better for that. When you look at the schools that are really seeing the successes from doing this type of work, they're not just being reactive as part of the culture of the school, and we see the results of that in their academic data. So the last session that which we referenced, that was the principal's really guiding light, right? Was having a culture of restorative practices from start to finish. And so we're not going to get there with all of our schools if we are if we're really not investing for making those system-wide improvements, for having, a handful of CFTs, a handful of RJ folks, et cetera. And the last point I'll make, and then I'll get back in the queue, is around the professional development. It would be great when we next come back, or before, to get a breakdown, clarity around what is all the restorative justice related, equity work, anti-racism work related, PD, who is it required for, and hopefully it sounds like right now it's really just a reactive thing. So I would like to learn more about that. Now I have concerns. I want to know what exactly flags somebody for those trainings, but it's got to be on the front end. And this is something that we have heard consistently from community members as well as from this body. There has to be mandatory anti-racism training for everybody who is interacting with our students and for everybody who is overseeing them. And we need to be able to see the data on who is actually attending them, and we need to be able to see outcome metrics that are associated. So it would be great to get, as we move forward, to make sure that we're getting that, and also an understanding of each of these trainings, like how do you ensure their quality? Who is choosing them? Who is putting them together? Who is leading them? And what are the outcome metrics that are associated with them? I see your finger on the button.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond. So just so everyone is aware, and you're aware, there has been mandatory system-wide anti-racist training in the past and in the present. So I just, Now I want to say the quantity or time of that training, I think there's a lot to be unpacked with that, and the way it's been delivered. And I think that's what I was getting at with PD. When it's pushed out to a school and delivered by either a staff development teacher or a principal, assistant principal, the quality may differ from school to school, and that's a significant concern. And the other thing I just wanted to say to make sure, so when Dr. Hamlet showed those just like 10 voluntary trainings, what I was sharing is, as a principal, and I'm just going to go put my principal hat back on, I could make it a requirement for a teacher or supporting services or my assistant principal to a 10-day training if I believed they really needed it. So out of those 10 voluntary trainings, I could write in their evaluation, one of the follow-up action items that I want you to, that needs to be completed by July 1 is that I want you to take this training, and we're going to have a reflective conversation after the completion of it. So that's what I was getting at with requiring it. Any principal can require that. They could require it for their whole staff, right? They could say we're all going to take this training, but there are times where it's specifically for one professional that they feel like really needs to benefit from it.
Great. It would be great to get a better understanding of how that's actually playing out on the ground. Are there principals who are requiring it of lots of people, principals who are requiring it just of one person or another, and are we seeing outcomes that are reflective of that? Yeah, Dr. Hamlet.
Yeah, sure. If I could just add, I think this brings me back to a point I made earlier about the work kind of shifting. Those courses, those PDO courses that were listed, are not necessarily anti-racist systems professional learning, right? I think the organization has shifted and responded to organizational challenges related to influence of international conflicts over the time, domestic political tensions, and a growing number of incidents of hate, which has shifted our focus a bit more toward that anti-hate bias work. And it certainly has helped us to recognize that the anti-racist work has to be elevated, or, as I said, re-embedded into the practices that we have. But I just want to be clear that I think sometimes we use the words interchangeably, right? We use equity or anti-bias or culturally responsive teaching or, anti-racism interchangeably, and those are different things. And there certainly requires a layered approach. And so those courses that were listed, I would not necessarily categorize them as anti-racist systems professional learning. So I think that's an add-on, certainly, and something that, as Dr. Moran said, principals could certainly require employees to participate in, as could central office leaders. But I just wanted to make that distinction.
Thank you. I think that's a great point. And I will also thank my colleagues for referencing the tracker, which we have talked about, because one thing that I really like about that is the clarity that it brought. And so hopefully I'm glad to hear that there is thought about maybe updating it, modifying it to be reflective of where we are now with us given an understanding of how it's being modified. But the clarity, which, I'm looking at the old version of it now, or, I say old, but I guess it's current, it just hasn't been updated, and it shows like this one is 100% complete. And we could ask you, what does that mean? And this one is 25% complete. This one is 0% complete. Like that is really helpful to be able to see those changes over time, over the last couple of years and moving forward. And it's a lot of the line items on this are reflective of the conversations that we are having today. So I think a lot of them are still relevant. And I think as we talk about transparency and accountability, having that kind of clarity, what exactly is happening, where are we moving forward and where are we stagnating, having something like this, I think really does help with that conversation.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that we'll look to do in the modification of that tracker is to make sure that, which is why I mentioned my disdain for dashboards, is because I just don't believe that equity work is ever check, we're done, we're 100% complete. And so I want to really look at rewriting the goals and things that we've said, not just what's embedded within the strategic plan, but also what is remaining from the audit that's something that needs to continually be addressed, recognizing that certainly in this day and time, equity work is never complete.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's changing some of the metrics, right? You know, for example, this percent of professionals have been trained, or these numbers have gone down, whatever it is, it's going to require vigilance and monitor, but we need to have a place where we have the right metrics that are being tracked over time, where there is accountability. And it doesn't have to be exactly that, but those are some, I think, good indicators. Councilmember Evans wanted to follow up.
Yes, so it was way back, you were talking about Dr. Coleman. And Dr. Moran, you can help me. In listening to how you describe Dr. Coleman, wasn't that reminiscent of Wayne Wiggums? So I feel like we need to, hiring him for that position, if that's what he's doing, calling up people, that would make a difference in the appeals that the board sees, in suspicions in the future, and just making administrators be thoughtful about how they're making decisions in their school buildings, which will cut down on suspension. So I didn't get to you right when you said it, but when you said it, I wrote Wayne Wiggums' name down, because that's when, so I was a parent, and I remember when he passed away, everybody was devastated. But what I also remember hearing from people in the community, in particular people that were internal in the school system, is that he was just really great in that office in ensuring that, our kids were looked at as kids,
Yes.
and adults treated them and handled them with better care. So if that's who came to mind when you described Dr. Coleman, if that's who we have in that position, we're on the cusp, right?
Absolutely.
Of doing some good things. But, the community wants now, there's a sense of urgency. I totally understand it. But if you want to do it right, it might take a little bit of time. But we do want you to hurry. But I just wanted to acknowledge that. Did that sound like Wayne Wiggums? And you sound like you
I
should
want
be
you
in.
to please share. I just will say that I'm not sure the impact that Wayne Wiggum had when he was the director of that department.
Mm-hmm.
But as a former student of Wayne Wiggum, who experienced the very description that I said about Dr. Coleman, I can say absolutely that is the type of work that we need to be doing and the type of leaders that we
Yes.
need to have.
Absolutely.
But yes, Mr.
Okay.
Wiggum was a gem.
So I'm glad you mentioned that, and because I would say that the other part about Dr. Coleman calling people is that principals are calling Dr. Coleman on
That's
the flip
perfect.
side, a lot. And some of those calls that used to come in directors have gone to Dr. Coleman. And also Dr. Coleman sends us data, school-specific data, where he's seen increases in suspension and wants to partner with us around sitting down with the principal and having conversations
Very
about
good.
why decisions were made the way that they were. And so it is a very different feeling that Dr. Coleman is also is a former principal right out of the principalship. So the
Francis
credibility
Scott Key, right?
component is significantly high. So I'm glad you made that comparison.
Yeah, because you know what? So some things can't be taught in a training. And I think for the things that we need people to have, you get it from people like Dr. Coleman, from what I heard you say. It sounds like you need to be in HR. No, but I love the fact that, so I don't love that we don't have somebody in the position that we need them in, and we're looking for them in February, but I love the intentionality about you saying, so the paper and what you say isn't enough. We just need to fill it in a different kind of way, because it is important, and I think we need to do more of that when we're putting people in the positions that are in the school system that are touching our kids, because that's part of it. So thank you. Yes. Yeah. Looking forward to hearing more from your office and just having the conversation about what's happening.
So thank you for the that follow-up. Obviously, everything we're doing here is driving towards, we want our students to do well. We will have an update. I think it's scheduled already on the latest data. Yeah, I don't know what date it is, but it's soon, on where students are. And obviously, all of that is connected to the reason we want our students to be treated well and not be dealing with suspension disproportionately, because we want them to be in class learning and getting what they need. We also know that if you feel like I was going to bring this up, but I'll integrate it into this point. In domain 4, if there's concerns about how we teach racial history with nuance and cultural sensitivity, right, which was a concern raised in the audit, right, which I think none of us will deny that not everyone has the same level of fluency or ability to do that well. That connects not only to that curriculum implementation and how those things are taught, but also how you feel about your math class or your reading class or whatever you're learning. And so you can't disentangle this work to the work of student achievement, because it's critical. Either they need to be present, but also they need to feel reflected and seen and heard and valued, their voices and experiences valued, and obviously not experiencing disproportionality. So how do you, let me just ask a question around that. How do you see your office, Dr. Hamlet, working on that type of issue? Like how the history, we're in a moment now where literally people are trying to rewrite history, right? I went to Whitman earlier this week. They have a great social justice program that was started by the now principal, but before he was a principal. And I went and looked at different projects that these students are doing to address an issue dealing with injustice. And one student had chosen the topic of the erasure of history of people of color and of women and other marginalized groups, and about how this is. They'd use the example of the African American History Museum that's being attacked, the Smithsonian items being, and my job, part of our job as the adults that were there to give feedback. I said, well, did you know that there are several items from Montgomery County in that museum? And she didn't know that. And I said, she was going to do as a follow-up to what had happened to those. Had they been given back? Had they been removed? I say all that to say we're at a moment where history is literally being erased. I think it's even more important to lean in, and I know we are in many ways, into the proper and appropriate teaching of history here in the county. How do you see your work related to that? How do you see this work related to that?
Sure. So great question. One thing that we are in the very beginning stages with, and I'm going to pull in a couple of components. First, looking at student voice and agency from a social justice action standpoint. Not just, groups where we have our student leaders that are the typical student leaders that you see, right? And working with our social studies department, working with our equity department and student leadership to bring in some type of programming specifically for our middle and high school students that gets at that social justice action. And also thinking about ways, how you have a profile of a graduate? What's the profile of a teacher? What are our students looking for in their teachers, right? And so that's one area. The other thing that I will say is that when I mentioned modifying the tracker and kind of the action plan, today I highlighted goals 3 and 4 of our strategic plan, because that's where you find most of the anti-racist audit recommendations embedded within the plan. But we have 2 other goals in our plan. And that gets at academic excellence, that gets at future-ready graduates. And so that's really where the work has to be done to really tie in the anti-racist audit recommendations in those 6 domains to ensure that it is lived and seen in not just goals 3 and 4, but also in goals 1 and 2.
I appreciate that. And I brought up the rigorous coursework as another item earlier. The school improvement plan, and do you have another question after this? Okay. The school improvement plan integration, you mentioned that it's uneven, right? Just talk a little bit of how you're identifying schools that need support in this area and what that work looks like.
So in terms of the actual plan itself, or what's inside of the plan?
Sure. Yes. But I mean, I think both but I mean, primarily as it relates to this work?
Yeah. So so with 211 schools and 13 cross-functional teams, right? So what we do is we go through and we tier schools based off of multiple measures of data. One of the key levers for that is the opportunity gap. So two components of the opportunity gap that we put basically in an algorithm to determine what tier 3 being the most intensive support is the disproportionality in access to either like AP coursework or accelerated coursework, and then actual academic outcomes. So looking at those two factors, they play into the tier of support that we provide. At this time, we have around 30 schools that receive tier 3 or intensive support, meaning that they need support that is wraparound support that extends to anti-racist practices, that extends to EML support, special education, literacy. So then we have tier 2, which is more targeted. Could be very specific to practices aligned with the anti-racist audit or practices that are specific to mathematics alone and working specifically with their math department. And then we have tier 1 schools where based off of these multi-measures of data, we've determined that they're more on like a consult basis and we more partner with them and they ask for support. So it's very similar to almost what a classroom would look like, those interventions. So
Every school's in one of those categories.
Every school's in one of those categories, and then what we do is for their school improvement plan, the action plan that they have. So for all those tier 3 schools, the CFT has an action plan that correlates with their school improvement plan.
Team.
Yep, cross-functional team. So that it's not siloed work, but it's complementary work that's shared. So the cross-functional team plan is actually mirrors the school improvement plan. And that's why we've also tried to make it a point at a lot of those school improvement sessions to ensure that the cross-functional team is present because they are an integral part of that school improvement plan.
So how would, probably both are correct, Dr. Hamlet's office in the soon-to-be hired Director of Equity be integrated into that process of, for example, the 30 schools that are needing more serious intervention, particularly around opportunity gaps, disciplinary items that are core connected to what we're talking about today?
So the conduit would be the professional learning specialist, which Dr. Hamlet supervises. So
who would be a part of that team?
Who are part of that team. And then the thing that we've had some instances where we've had to pull multiple equity specialists in to support a tier 3 school, which it's similar to a classroom, right? When you take resources from one area, you are taking them from somewhere.
Gets back to the issue of why we don't have enough coverage that we're talking about.
Yeah. So, for instance, a tier 3 school around this that we've worked closely with has been a high school recently where Dr. Hamlet and I have had to do a lot of intensive work with the leadership of that school and the community of that school. And we've pulled multiple equity specialists and even leaned on some professional learning specialists that are more RJ centered from other teams to be a part of that work. So,
okay.
Yeah,
that's helpful. Yeah, I was at the budget presentation. I think the whole committee was at the presentation for the superintendent for the operating budget. Obviously, the board still has to do their work. I do not remember seeing any additional equity specialists in that budget request. Is that correct? Could you just say it on the mic?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Mink.
Thanks. On that note, I just wanted to get clarity on the difference between the professional learning specialists and the equity specialists, if you could speak to that.
Sure. So the equity specialists are also considered instructional specialists, but the professional learning specialists are a combination of people who have the restorative justice training and those who were former LASs or learning achievement specialists. Their role is to really work with the schools and the cross-functional team on the instructional, the classroom management pieces, the restorative justice preventative work, as well as the work that is responsive when harm has occurred. The equity specialists, and this is where I was mentioning earlier, have had to kind of become a little more like generalists. But the problem with that is because of the capacity issue, they are being stretched thin and having to go to other schools or within their own cross-functional teams when there's a specialty area that they have. So we keep using Dr. Daryl Howard as the example, but our equity specialists are developing the professional learning in partnership with professional learning specialists. They're developing providing support in the central services required anti-racist training. So they are partnering with people from different departments to make sure that the professional learning from the classroom all the way through central services is responsive to what our data is saying. Again, I would say that the partnership is what is key, because we have a number of professional learning specialists and equity specialists that serve alongside our ELD. Help me with the
Emergent multilingual.
yes, and then we have a number of
Special education.
Thank you. There are a number of people on the cross-functional teams that represent different departments. And so the job of the equity specialist is to, in those cross-collaboration or cross-departmental meetings, to bring in that equity lens. And that brings me back to that question that I said as an example for the school improvement team. So who is experiencing burden or benefit as a result of either what our data is showing us, what our current practices are, or this professional learning that we're, co-creating together.
Got it. Thank you. So between those, the equity specialists and the professional learning specialists, it sounds like there's kind of 3-ish buckets of work. Does that sound?
3-ish. Yes,
3
that would be a great way to describe it.
Okay. And then some, right? Okay, so I'm just saying that I'm concerned, and I hope that there's further thought about what investment in this space could look like, because as the reorganization was happening, we had a lot of community members and principals, really, for example, who were asking for more support in terms of, if we just look at one of those buckets, restorative justice. And we've repeatedly brought success stories in front of us of schools where that's a main focus, and we've looked at the great results that they are getting. We know, and that's because we know that it's important and we know that it's effective. But yet we have 7-ish people who really have expertise in that area, and their full-time focus is not on restorative justice. And then on the equity side, we have people who are covering 2 cross-functional teams each, and clearly their body of work also goes beyond, really what we would like them to be dedicated to as well. So everybody's stretched thin everywhere. I know we don't have unlimited budget, but when we talk about, the importance of how we want to leverage the cross-functional teams in order to multiply the impact that each of those experts are able to bring, this is a body of work where we need investment. So I would appreciate more thought about what that could look like as we move forward, and I'm sure that the new director, when they come in, will also have good ideas in regards to that work. As we I think we're moving towards a close here, but I just wanted to see if there's anything else that you want to add about how your work in this space is going to result in specific change. And we've talked about this, but if there's anything else that you want to add, how is the work going to result in specific changes in how Black and Brown students experience the school system on a daily basis? Like, what tangible changes are African American students going to see over the next year, for example, to improve their experience, their level of comfort, their academic achievement? What can we anticipate?
Yes, so thank you for that question. I think there's a number of things that have to be done. I'll go back to what I said earlier about this being long arc systems change, and really amplifying student voice and agency. I think as adults, we often think we know what's best for our students, when this generation of students are very clear and fierce and fearless when it comes to identifying what their needs are. So I would say that really modeling the behavior that we expect to see at every level of the organization when it comes to anti-racist practices in the work that we're doing, and tying that to things that are accountability structures like our strategic plan and our evaluation system and our school improvement plans, again, so that it's drilled down to every level, going down to our students, our classrooms, our schools, and the system level. But again, I would just say, going back to that long arc systems change and having an equity vision that is grounded in anti-racist practices, and that we can pull from where those gaps lie in the anti-racist audit action plan and where we currently see our strategic plan.
Okay, thank you. And I look forward to having conversations that we can also really base around like the data and the timelines, the tracker, all of those things. Thanks very much.
Yeah, agreed. And I just want to mention on the MAP data, we're going to do that the first week of March after the board receives it. This is the student achievement data. And when we come back to the point that Councilmember Mink made, since it's embedded in everything we do, I'd like us to talk about that in the context of this, of equity and student, obviously that just needs to be a part. It's not a side part of the conversation. It is the conversation, right? And so whatever pre-preparation needs to happen prior to that, I'm just signaling to our staff and to MCPS that I'd like to look at those numbers through the lens of this work as well, and have intentional conversation around that. And, you know, some of the data that informed the audit, we talked about this, I can't remember, at a previous session last year, around the climate survey and just the low response rates for certain populations. Obviously that informs, right, this work and how people are feeling. And so could you talk about any changes since we've discussed that, about how you're going to try to improve that going forward?
So happy to share. So we now are in a sequence of where we are taking the climate survey more than just once a year. So we just completed, prior to the winter break, the window for the fall climate assessment that was done to our that was conducted for student, staff, and community. We saw a significant increase in response rate. I think a lot of that is we didn't have system communication. We had more intimate principal PTA communication going to their communities. We involved multiple stakeholder groups in disseminating that information. And I want to highlight a couple of schools, and one that I know is near and dear to Councilmember Mink's heart. But when we look at like the response rate from communities, New Hampshire Estates had a response rate that I believe was over 30% for families, which I know sounds not great.
A lot better than 5%.
A lot better than 5%, right? So again, I think it goes back to those promising lessons that we need to get principals and leaders in front of other leaders, because we did see high response rates in schools that we typically would not see high response rates in. And I think that speaks to school leadership partnering with community and parent leadership to come up with innovative ways to get responses. But we did see a much greater response rate than we did last spring on this assessment. And we're just going to continue chipping away at that to get that number higher and higher.
Yeah, and I think other forms of getting data in too, right? You know, Dr. Hamlet, you mentioned the student voice. You know, we had created a thing a while back when we were dealing with the issue of around policing in schools, and called the Student Wellness Action Group. We call it the SWAG Group. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it was constituted and then said it was going to be kind of stayed around. Like, this is over the course of a couple of superintendents, but I don't care if it's that. I don't have ownership of that, but there needs to be a meaningful way, as you said, to have student engagement around these issues consistently as changes are made, in getting that feedback. And so I also just would encourage you all to do that as you're working through this new hire and in setting up your processes as a mechanism of feedback and accountability in and of itself. Thank you. I think we've been talking about a lot today, and we will have you back, and look forward to updates as they come. I know we've made some additional requests, which we will make sure we get to you in writing so that we're all on the same page. It's one of the things I want us to be accountable to what we've asked for, and that you know and we know, and that it comes back. And apologies again to members of the public for the issue with the feed, but everything will be available online, including the presentations that were given today. So with that, thank you, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.